Hi everyone, welcome to Paranormal M. I'm glad you're here again. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, please give the video a like. And if you've had any strange or unexplained experiences yourself, feel free to send them to me. We'll begin with the story of Wei, someone remembered for decades as a frightening figure, but whose story has become more complicated over time. Settle in, listen along, and I hope you sleep well tonight. You know, there are some names that don't just fade into history. They linger. In Thailand, one of those names was Wei. For decades, people spoke his name like a warning. To many, he was remembered as something terrifying, a child killer, a cannibal, a man turned into a symbol of pure evil. Parents would even frighten their children with him, saying, "Behave, or Wei will come and get you." But when you look closer at his story, something starts to feel uneasy in a different way. Not only because of what he was accused of doing, but because of what people may have misunderstood. Wei was not born in Thailand. He was born around the late 1920s in a poor village in Guangdong, China. His childhood was marked by hunger, hardship, and being treated cruelly by others. Then war came, and like many young men of that time, he was pulled into violence he never asked for, surviving years of conflict and instability. In the late 1940s, he left China and came to Thailand alone, hoping life might finally become gentler. But it didn't. He arrived with almost nothing. He could not speak Thai well. He had no relatives nearby, no real protection, and no place where he truly belonged. He moved from town to town, taking whatever work he could find, carrying goods, tending gardens, helping in markets, doing exhausting jobs his body was barely strong enough to handle. And because he was poor, foreign, quiet, and different, people often mocked him. They pushed him away. They treated him like someone already half outside the world. Even his name was changed by mistake. The name he was born with was recorded incorrectly by officials, and over time, that error became the name everyone knew. In a strange and painful way, even his identity was taken from him. Then, as the years passed, darker rumors began to gather around him. Wei had grown up hearing old folk beliefs, including the idea that eating certain human organs could give a person strength, courage, or health. To most people, that sounds horrifying. But when someone has lived through hunger, illness, war, and fear, old superstitions can twist themselves into something that feels like desperate logic. By the 1950s, children had gone missing in different parts of Thailand, and suspicion eventually fell on him. He was arrested and accused in several cases. But this is where the story becomes more complicated than the legend allows. Only one case had strong physical evidence. In 1958, he was caught in Rayong while burning the body of a young boy. That case became the center of the prosecution against him. The other accusations relied heavily on confessions, and those confessions were reportedly made through translation, under pressure, and without the kind of clear evidence people later assumed existed. At one point, he was said to have admitted to tasting human flesh. Later, he denied it. But by then, the public had already made up its mind. Newspapers called him a monster. They called him a cannibal. Fear spread quickly, and once that fear found a face, it held on tightly. In court, Wei was first sentenced to life in prison. After an appeal, the sentence changed. In 1959, he was executed. But there is one detail that matters deeply. He was officially convicted of only one murder. He was never legally convicted of cannibalism. And yet, that is the word history chained to him. After his death, his body was preserved and displayed in a medical museum for more than 60 years. Visitors would stand in front of his dried remains, reading a label that identified him as a cannibal. For generations, that display helped turn a man into a permanent nightmare. His story slipped out of the courtroom and became folklore. People told ghost stories about him. Some said his spirit wandered at night. Others claimed he appeared in dreams. Movies, rumors, and retellings kept shaping him into one of Thailand's most infamous monsters. But in recent years, people began asking harder questions. In 2019, a petition called for the museum to remove the word cannibal from his display, because that accusation had never been legally proven. The display was eventually removed, and in 2020, his body was cremated in a formal ceremony. No family came to claim him. And that detail feels painfully quiet, doesn't it? Today, some researchers believe his confessions may have been affected by poor translation, fear, pressure during interrogation, or even coercion. Others point to the anti-Chinese prejudice that existed at the time and wonder whether he became an easy target for a frightened society. So we are left with a difficult question. Was Sia Wee truly the monster people said he was? Or was he a lonely, damaged man who became something larger than himself because fear needed a name? Maybe the horror of this story is not only in the crime. Maybe it is also in how quickly a human being can become a legend, and how hard it is to pull the truth back out once fear has swallowed it whole. I've always felt like my family carries something unusual with them. Not in a loud way, not in a way anyone really tries to explain. It's just there, woven into both sides of where we come from. My dad's side is Irish, and my mom's family is Greek. And growing up around both of those cultures, I always had this sense that people didn't treat the unseen as impossible. They took certain feelings seriously. Dreams, instincts, warnings, strange little signs. Things like that weren't brushed off as quickly in my family. My grandmother, especially, has always had this strange ability to sense when something terrible is about to happen. It's happened more than once, but the story that always stays with me is what happened to my mom when she was younger. My mom used to ride horses, and one day, out of nowhere, my grandmother got this overwhelming urge to drive along the route my mom usually took. She didn't even know for sure that my mom was out riding that day. She just felt like she had to go. And when she got there, she found my mom unconscious on the ground, bleeding, after she'd fallen head first from her horse. The part that still gives me chills is that earlier that same morning, my grandmother had randomly thought, "What if she doesn't wear her helmet today?" Which made no sense, because my mom always wore one. But that day, the strap on her helmet had broken, and she decided to ride without it. Then there's my dad. He's always had these odd little flashes of knowing. He'll wake up and think something like, "I hope the car battery isn't dead." And then, of course, he'll go outside and the car won't start. One time, that instinct may have saved me. I'd told him I didn't need a lift home from school because it was a nice afternoon, and where we lived, the walk was actually beautiful. Quiet roads, fields, that kind of countryside stillness. But while he was working, he suddenly got this urgent feeling that he needed to go look for me. He couldn't explain it. He just got up and went. He drove the whole route from school to our house, and eventually, he found me being followed and chased by two men. I don't really like thinking about what might have happened if he'd ignored that feeling. There's also something strange about the way my siblings and I were named. After my oldest brother was born, my dad bought our family home. At the very back of the garden, there was an old well. He hated the idea of a child falling into it, so one day, he decided to take it apart. As he was removing the bricks, he found 5 of them with names carved into them. First, he found one with my oldest brother's name. Then 2 bricks fell together, both with boys' names on them. After that, he found one with a girl's name, and then another girl's name. And that's the exact order we were born in. My oldest brother first, then twin boys, then me, Clara, then my younger sister. So yes, technically, I was named after a brick, which sounds ridiculous until you hear the rest of it. The boys' names were very Irish. My name was connected to Francis, which is a name that runs through the men in my family. And my sister's name meant Ireland. My dad had moved away from Ireland when he was about 9, after his father died. So it always felt like those names were somehow tied back to him. Then, when I was 8, I saw someone in the house. I remember seeing a man standing by a window, waving at me. I didn't know who he was. I didn't even really think about the grandfather I'd never met. He felt almost unreal to me, like someone from a story no one had fully told. But when I described him to my dad, he went completely still. I described his clothes, his hair, the way he looked, and then I mentioned that there was foam on one side of his face. That was when my dad froze. His father had died while shaving. I had never been told that. I didn't know what he looked like. I didn't know that detail at all. And now, as I've gotten older, I feel like I might have inherited a little of what both my grandmother and my dad have. A few years ago, my dad and I were driving to football training. We were coming up to a roundabout, sitting in the left lane to go straight ahead. A large black Mercedes pulled up beside us in the right lane. And suddenly, I just knew. I had this sharp, clear thought that the driver was going to cut across us and try to take the third exit from the wrong lane. Before I could even stop myself, I blurted out, "He's going to take the third exit. He's going to hit us." My dad looked at me like I'd said something completely absurd. I was 16. I didn't drive, and I had no real reason to think that. But I just said, "I know." And then it happened. When we moved forward to take our exit, the other driver swerved exactly the way I'd seen it in my mind. We later found out he was drunk. If my dad hadn't already been ready because of what I said, that car would have slammed straight into my door. Instead, my dad braked and steered just enough that the impact hit the front side of the car instead of me. I think about that a lot. Little things still happen too. I'll get these very specific thoughts that feel almost random, and then seconds later they come true. Once, I was walking my dog and had this sudden thought. What if there's a dog around this corner and it attacks? I pulled my dog's leash closer without really knowing why, and as soon as we turned the corner, another dog charged straight at us, dragging its owner behind it. The only reason my dog didn't get hurt was because I had already pulled her close enough to scoop her up. So I don't really know what to call it. Maybe it's instinct. Maybe it's something spiritual. Maybe it's my family, somehow, passing down a kind of awareness I don't fully understand. But I do know this. I've always felt watched over. Not in a frightening way, in a protected way. I live in one of those small apartment buildings where life just sort of repeats itself. Same neighbors passing each other in the hallway, same footsteps overhead, same elevator that groans like it's tired of everyone's problems. Nothing ever really changes there, so when the couple in the apartment next to mine suddenly disappeared, I noticed right away. They didn't say goodbye to anyone. One day, they were there, yelling through the walls, slamming cabinets, throwing out words sharp enough to cut through plaster. And then the next day, their apartment was just empty. No moving van outside, no cardboard boxes stacked by the stairs, no awkward little farewell in the lobby. Just gone. At first, I told myself they must have left in a rush. People do that, right? Relationships fall apart, rent gets missed, someone makes a decision at midnight, and by morning, there's nothing left but nail holes and dust. And honestly, part of me was relieved. I know that sounds cold, but their arguments used to keep me awake. Almost every night, I'd lie there staring at the ceiling while Marcus and Elena went at each other through the wall. So when they left, I thought maybe I'd finally get some sleep. But the silence after they were gone didn't feel peaceful. It felt wrong. The first night, I woke up a little after 2 in the morning. At first, I didn't know what had pulled me out of sleep. I just sat there in the dark, heart beating too fast, listening. Then it happened again. A heavy thud against the wall. Not a tap, not a knock. Something solid, something big, like a chair being shoved over, or a body hitting plaster. I stared at the wall between my apartment and theirs. Then I heard voices, muffled at first, but angry. A man and a woman. And the strange thing is, I knew those voices. I knew the rhythm of them. The way his voice would rise first, low and hard, and then hers would cut in, trembling but furious. It was them. It was Marcus and Elena. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. 2:14 a.m. I got out of bed and pressed my ear to the wall like an idiot in a horror movie, but I couldn't help myself. The voices got clearer, though not clear enough to make out the words. Still, there was no mistake. They were arguing. Again. Except they couldn't have been, because they had moved out. The next morning, I found the building manager in the lobby and asked him about it. I tried to sound casual, but I'm pretty sure my face betrayed me. He frowned and said, "They moved out 3 days ago. Locks were changed yesterday." I asked him if maybe someone else had gotten inside. He looked almost offended. "No one has the keys," he said. "That apartment is empty." I let it go, but something about the way he said that word stayed with me. Empty. Like he was trying to convince both of us. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat upright in bed with my phone in my hand, staring at the time as if I could scare the minutes into behaving. And at exactly 2:14 a.m., it started again. The voices, the anger, the same argument spilling through the wall like it had been waiting all day to begin. This time, I recorded it. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. It was louder than before, more violent. I heard something smash, glass maybe, and then Elena screamed. Not shouted, screamed. Then, all at once, everything stopped. No fading out, no door slam, no footsteps, just silence. Like the whole room next door had been swallowed. I played the recording back immediately. There was nothing on it. No voices, no crash, no scream. Just a flat hiss of static. The timestamp was right there on the screen. It had recorded at the exact moment I heard everything, but the audio was empty. That was when the fear really settled in. Not the sudden kind, the slow kind. The kind that pulls up a chair and makes itself comfortable. On the third night, I made a choice that I still wish I could take back. I went into the hallway. The building was dead quiet at that hour. Even the pipes seemed to be holding their breath. The ceiling lights flickered once, then steadied, leaving long shadows stretched across the carpet. I walked toward their door, apartment 302. And as I got closer, I heard the argument again. Not muffled anymore. Clear. Loud. Coming from inside. I want to tell you about one of the strangest and most unforgettable nights I've ever had. There's a little bit of backstory, so I'll keep it simple. When I was growing up, my family was very close with the people who lived next door. We did everything together. Vacations, birthdays, sleepovers, cookouts, all of it. Their house felt almost like an extension of ours. But over time, the parents went through a really painful rough patch in their marriage. Eventually, the mom decided she wanted a divorce, and soon after that, she took the kids on a summer trip to Washington to visit relatives. While they were gone, the dad took his own life in the house. It was devastating, not just for his family, but for us too, because we had known him for years. After that, the family moved away, and the house sat quiet for a while. About 8 months later, a new family moved in. They had 3 young kids, and since I was babysitting for extra money at the time, they asked me one evening if I could watch the children while they went out for a late movie. When I got there, the baby was already asleep. I only needed to put the toddler to bed and then let the oldest, a little girl named Lily, stay up until around 9. Everything was normal at first. I got the toddler tucked in, and when 9 o'clock came around, I took Lily upstairs. She asked if I could read her a story, and of course I said yes. But while I was reading, she kept looking past me. Not just glancing. She was staring over my shoulder, making these nervous little faces, like she was trying not to react to something. So I finally stopped and asked, "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" And she said, very quietly, "The sad man is back." I remember feeling this chill move through me. I said, "The sad man?" She nodded and pointed behind me. "He's right there. He keeps making my baby upset." She had this little baby doll tucked beside her, and she kept insisting that the sad man was bothering it and making it cry. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to scare her, so I just asked if she wanted me to close the bedroom door. She said yes. So I closed it, finished the story, and sat with her until she finally fell asleep. After that, I went to check on the actual baby. And the baby's room was the same room where our old neighbor had died. The second I opened the door, the air felt freezing. Not just a little cool, but icy in a way that didn't make sense. There was a small nightlight glowing near the crib, barely enough to see by. I leaned over to check on the baby, and while I was standing there, I felt what seemed like fingers press onto my shoulder. I turned around immediately. No one was there. The baby was still asleep. The room was silent. I left and went downstairs as calmly as I could, though inside I felt like my nerves had turned into glass. I sat on the couch and turned on the TV, trying to convince myself I was just creeped out because I knew what had happened in that house. But from where I was sitting, I could see the staircase. And I kept seeing something at the top of it. It looked like a head peeking around the corner. At first, I thought it had to be one of the kids, so I got up, went upstairs, turned on the light, and checked everything. All the bedroom doors were still closed. The bathroom was empty. Nobody was out of bed. So I went back downstairs and told myself I was imagining things. Maybe 20 minutes later, I heard footsteps above me. Slow, steady pacing. Back and forth. Then the footsteps came toward the stairs and stopped right at the top. I stared up there, waiting. Nothing moved. The kids' doors were still closed, so I knew it wasn't them. Then, a few minutes later, Lily came running out of her room, crying. She came straight to me, shaking and upset, and I tried to calm her down enough to tell me what had happened. She said, "The sad man came into my room. I told him he wasn't allowed, but he came in anyway. He was standing at the end of my bed." That was enough for me. I took her upstairs only long enough to grab her pillow and blanket, and then I brought her back down to the couch. I wasn't going to make that child sleep in that room again. While she was lying there trying to fall asleep, her bedroom door, which we had left open upstairs, slowly moved. It looked exactly like someone had just walked out. About half an hour later, her parents came home. Her dad saw her sleeping on the couch and asked what happened. I was going to say she'd had a nightmare, because I didn't know how to explain any of it. But Lily woke up and immediately started telling him about the sad man. Her dad just rolled his eyes. He told her there was no such thing and that she needed to stop making things up. He brought her back upstairs, and I could hear them arguing a little as he kept telling her she was going back to bed. I felt awful for her. The mom paid me and thanked me, and I wanted so badly to say something. I wanted to tell her what had happened in that house before they moved in. But I didn't know if it was my place, and I didn't want to sound like I was trying to frighten her. So I went home. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few days later, I told another neighbor what had happened. He decided to go over and speak with the mom himself. He told her about the man who had lived there before and what had happened just months before they moved in. And strangely enough, she wasn't surprised. She told him that she and the kids had already experienced things in the house. Her husband, though, never had. So every time the children talked about the sad man, he thought they were just making excuses not to go to bed. My family moved away about 6 months after that, but I kept in touch with a few people from the neighborhood. From what I heard, that family only stayed in the house for about a year. After they left, it sat empty for a few months before it was finally sold. That's the last I ever heard about it. I want to tell you about the house I grew up in, because I don't think you can really understand what happened there unless you know what that place was before it ever belonged to us. The land used to hold a little one-room schoolhouse, built sometime around the late 1800s. By the 1950s, the school had closed, and a couple bought the property. They moved the old schoolhouse to the back corner of the lot and built a modest ranch-style home where the main house stood. Years later, in the 1980s, my father bought it from them. He was already living there when he met my mother. She moved in after they married in 1992, and I was born a couple of years later. When my younger brother was on the way, my father had an addition built onto the house. That house sat right where two rural roads met, on a corner that always felt unsafe. Cars went off the road more than once and ended up in our yard. I know at least 2 of those accidents were fatal. There were other bad things too. Once, during repairs after a roof job went wrong and heavy rains flooded the house, a worker lost part of his finger in the old bathroom. And I need to say this plainly. My father was not a kind man. He hurt my mother, my brother, and me. I won't go into the details here because that isn't really what this story is about. But the feeling of him, the way he spoke, the coldness in his eyes, still visits me in nightmares. I stopped speaking to him years ago, and as far as I know, he still lives in that house alone. The first strange thing I know about happened before I was born, when my mother was pregnant with me. My father worked evenings, so she would go to bed before he came home. Almost every night, after she was already in bed, but before he returned, the phone would ring. When she answered, there was nothing but static. No voice, no breathing, just that harsh, empty hiss. It never happened when my father was home, only when she was alone. Then, not long before I was born, the calls stopped completely and never happened again. Years later, when my mother was home with us during the day, something odd happened constantly in the kitchen. She would be putting dishes away, and the cabinet door she needed would open by itself. Then, after she was done, it would close again. Not all the cabinets, just the right one. The strange part was that the cabinets had magnetic latches. They weren't loose, and they weren't uneven. My mother checked. Nothing was wrong with them. And they never opened for my father or anyone else. After my brother was born, I moved into what had once been my father's office. That was when I started hearing footsteps at night. I would wake up and hear someone pacing in the hallway outside my bedroom door. Back and forth, back and forth. The steps were too heavy to be my mother's, and I could hear my father snoring through the wall between my room and theirs. So whoever, or whatever, was walking outside my door was not either of them. I remember lying there, frozen under the blankets, staring at the doorknob. I was sure it was going to turn. It never did. But that didn't make it feel safer. At some point, I became aware of something else in that room. This was different from the footsteps. This felt like a presence in the corner near the window. It felt dark there, even in a room that should have had light. And whatever was in that corner felt like it wanted to hurt me. I kept a nightlight in that room long after I stopped needing one anywhere else. I believed, with my whole little heart, that if the room ever became completely dark, something terrible would happen. The whole house had a heavy feeling to it. Oppressive is the best word I can use, but the addition felt different. In there, I could breathe easier. It felt lighter. I remember standing in the addition after dark, looking toward the older part of the house, and feeling absolute terror at the thought of walking back into it. There was no clear reason for it. No sound, no shadow, nothing I could point to. Just fear, sudden and huge. The basement was worse. It was only partly finished, always damp, and at one point they found black mold down there. I hated going into it. The farther I went down the stairs, the harder it was to breathe. One time I saw glowing eyes on the landing where the stairs turned. I thought it was my father's cat watching me from the dark. Later, I found out the cat had been put down the week before. Then there was the old schoolhouse. My father was a photographer, and he converted it into a studio. I spent a lot of time there as a child, but I never felt alone in that building. Not once. It always felt like something was watching me. And somehow, I felt like it was above me, on the ceiling. One day, my brother and I were playing in the studio when something happened that I still don't know how to explain. Suddenly, I wasn't looking out through my own eyes anymore. I was above us. I could see my brother and myself playing down below, as though I were the thing on the ceiling, watching us. It lasted for a few minutes. Then, just like that, I was back in my body, standing on the floor as if nothing had happened. Those are the things I remember most clearly from that house. There may have been more, especially things that happened to my mother, but if there were, she never told me. My brother later said he felt something watching us from the ceiling in the studio too. He also said things happened in his room, though I don't know the details. As for my father, I never heard him say he experienced anything. But honestly, even if he did, I don't think he would have told anyone. I was 9 years old when my father died by suicide in our family home. For years before that, life had already been heavy. My dad's drinking had taken over so much of our world, and everyone in the house had been carrying more than any of us knew how to carry. The first night after he was gone, the rest of us slept together in one large bed. It was my mom, my older brother, my sister, and me. I think none of us wanted to be alone. The house felt too quiet and too full at the same time. I barely slept that night. I kept drifting off, waking up, then drifting off again. At one point, I remember lying there awake, staring out the window beside the bed, when I heard something I had never heard before. And I need to explain this clearly because I had lived in that house my entire life. I knew the sounds it made. I knew the creaks, the wind, the animals, the pipes, the old farmhouse noises. But this was different. It sounded like drumming. Not a drum exactly, but a rhythm being tapped against something metallic, maybe sheet metal. There were no voices, no footsteps with it, just this pattern on metal. It went something like dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum. The heavier beats were sharper, almost intentional. It had this strange, old, ritual kind of feeling to it. I do not really know how else to describe it. Something about it felt almost like shamanic music, though I know that sounds odd. This happened in Finland, out in the countryside, and the sound continued for a few minutes. Then it stopped. I heard it again a little over a year later. By then, we had moved to the other side of the country, but we still owned the farm where I had grown up. My brother and I stayed there for 2 nights before the place was sold. That second night, the sound woke me up. The same rhythm, the same metal-like drumming, the same feeling. I knew immediately it was the sound from that first night after my father died. I did not have to think about it. My whole body recognized it before my mind did. This time, I was terrified. I got out of bed and went into the room where my brother was sleeping because I could not stay alone with that sound. To this day, I still do not know what it was. I know Finnish farmhouses. I know the wilderness. I know what animals sound like, what weather sounds like, what old buildings do at night. This was not any of that. And after those 2 nights, I never heard it again. I have always felt it was connected to my father somehow. After he died, there were other things too. Footsteps when no one was there. Sudden temperature changes that did not feel natural. Objects falling for no clear reason. Small things that made it feel like something or someone was still present. My mother even said she saw him a couple of times. I am older now, 27, and some questions have only grown louder with time. This is one of them. I feel like that rhythm meant something. I do not know what, and maybe I never will, but it has stayed with me all these years. So if anyone has ever heard of something like this, or has any knowledge, experience, or even a theory, I would be grateful to hear it. Back in the early 2000s, my friends and I went through this short phase where we were really into ghost hunting. For a few months, that was our thing. We'd look up the creepiest places near us, wait until late at night, and then go see what we could find. Most of the places were scary in that normal, abandoned building kind of way. Broken windows, old furniture, weird noises, stuff like that. But there was one house that was different. That one still bothers me when I think about it. The house was in Chino, California. It's gone now, but at the time it was still standing. People around there called it the Copeland House. The story we heard was that sometime in the 80s, a man escaped from the nearby prison and broke into this house to hide. Back then, that area was a lot more rural. Mostly farmland, cows, open space, and houses spread far apart. A family lived in that house. A mother, a father, and 2 children. A boy and a girl. From what we were told, the escaped prisoner attacked the family and killed them in a terrible way. The boy was badly hurt, but somehow managed to crawl into a hallway closet and survive. The rest of the family didn't. I don't know how much of every detail was true, but that was the story we had heard before going there. So one night, of course, we decided to go. There were 5 of us. We pulled up in the middle of the night, and the place looked exactly like the kind of house you'd regret entering. It was fenced off, the windows were boarded up, there were old warning signs, and graffiti covered the outside. The whole place had this heavy feeling before we even stepped inside. We found a way through the fence and got around to the back. One of the windows already had the boards ripped off, and the glass was broken, so we climbed in one at a time. A couple of us had brought things for protection, just in case there were people inside. One friend had a camera and kept taking pictures as we moved through the house. Inside, the house was empty, but not in a clean way. It felt abandoned in the worst possible sense. There were broken picture frames still hanging on the walls, graffiti everywhere, and awful messages written across the rooms. Things like, "Don't go in," "Death is here," and other stuff that felt less like teenage vandalism and more like warnings. We moved through the living room first, then toward the kitchen. All the cabinet doors were hanging open. We had only one flashlight, so everyone stayed close together in a line. I was at the back. Eventually, we reached the hallway closet. According to the story, that was where the little boy had crawled after he was attacked. Someone opened the closet door, and I remember looking down at the carpet. A huge part of it was stained dark. Old, dried blood, or at least that's what it looked like. That was the first moment where the whole thing stopped feeling like a scary adventure. We kept going down the hall and checked the rooms. Every room had something written on the walls or ceiling. Some of it was just crude graffiti, but some messages felt personal, almost desperate. Then we got to the master bedroom. That room felt colder than the rest of the house. I know that sounds dramatic, but I really don't know how else to describe it. It felt like pressure, like the air in there was heavier. There were dark stains on the carpet, and right near the light switch, someone had written a message that made my skin crawl. I don't remember the exact words, but it was something close to, "Do not lock anyone in this room alone. Please don't. This is not a joke." None of us laughed at that. The house wasn't big, so it didn't take long to see most of it. After a while, we started heading back out. I was still at the end of the line, and my friend with the camera was still taking random pictures. That's when I heard it. It was a little girl's moan. Clear as day. Not a scream, not a whisper, just this sad, aching sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside the house. The hair on the back of my neck stood up immediately. I was about to ask the person in front of me, "Did you hear that little girl?" But I stopped myself because I didn't want to put the idea in their head. So instead, I just asked, "Did you hear something?" They turned around slowly, eyes wide, and said, "I just heard a little girl moan." That was it. We were done. We ran for the window so fast that one of my friends cut himself climbing out. One of the biggest guys in our group completely froze once we got outside. He was a tall, strong guy, the kind of person you'd expect to be calm in a situation like that. But he just dropped down and started crying. He kept saying, "Something evil is in that house." One of the girls with us had to sit with him, hold his hand, and talk him through it before he could stand up and get back to the car. That was our last ghost hunting trip. None of us wanted to do it anymore after that. A few days later, my friend uploaded the photos from his camera. The pictures from before and after that house were normal, clear, ordinary pictures. But the photos from inside the Copeland house were filled with orbs. Dozens of them, floating in the rooms, in the hallway, all over. I know people explain those away as dust or camera glare, and maybe that's true. But after what we heard in that house, those pictures felt different. I wish I still had them, but it wasn't my camera, and this was before smartphones were everywhere. Years later, maybe around 2020, I was at my mom's house and saw a newspaper sitting on her dinner table. I remember thinking that was strange, because hardly anyone I knew still got newspapers. Then I noticed a small story on the front page about the escaped convict from that old case finally being put to death. It felt like the whole thing had come back around after all those years. I still think about that house sometimes. I think about that sound in the hallway. I think about how both of us heard the same thing at the same time. And even now, it still gives me chills. So this all started a little over a month ago. There wasn't some dramatic moment that kicked it off. Nothing fell off a shelf, no shadow crossed my room, no whisper in my ear. It was quieter than that. I just started getting this strange feeling whenever I tried to go to sleep. And it wasn't exactly fear. It wasn't that classic feeling of someone's watching me, or something terrible is about to happen. It was more like my body knew something was wrong before my mind did. Just this heavy little warning sitting in my chest telling me, something is off. For a while, the only way I could sleep was with the TV on. If I turned it off, I'd either lie awake for hours, completely exhausted but unable to drift off, or I'd sleep horribly. I'd have nightmares, wake up soaked in sweat, sometimes more than once in the same night. I mean completely drenched, like I'd stepped out of a shower. After a couple of weeks of that, I started realizing the TV wasn't helping as much as I wanted it to. The light was too bright. The noise was too much. I used to sleep best in total darkness, so eventually I told myself I was being ridiculous and decided to go back to sleeping the way I normally did. For the first few nights, nothing happened. Then the sound started. Every night, right when I was close to falling asleep, I'd hear something outside the edge of my hearing. It sounded almost like an animal, but not quite. That's the only way I can explain it. It had the shape of an animal sound, but something about it was wrong. Like something was trying to copy an animal without really understanding how animals sound. At first, I tried to be logical. I'm not someone who jumps straight to ghosts or demons. I don't fully deny that kind of stuff, but I don't exactly go looking for it either. I thought maybe my brain was playing tricks on me because I was tired. But then I realized I could hear it even when I was fully awake. Eyes open, body moving. Not dreaming, not stuck in sleep paralysis. Just lying there in the dark, listening to something that should not have been there. And honestly, for a while I wondered if there was some kind of creature involved. I know that sounds ridiculous. I even thought of those stories about skinwalkers for a second, but I live nowhere near America. I'm in a crowded city, surrounded by buildings and traffic, with the nearest real forest miles and miles away. So that didn't make sense either. Then things got worse. About a week ago, I was lying in bed, half asleep and half awake, when I felt something touch me from behind in a way that was so invasive and wrong that I shot up instantly. My whole body jolted awake. I was shaking, but I tried not to panic. I told myself maybe it was some strange half-dream, some lighter version of sleep paralysis, since I had been right on the edge of sleep. Nothing else happened that night, so I forced myself to let it go. A couple of days later, my girlfriend Mira came over. We were lying in that same bed, and I finally told her everything. I wasn't even sure I should talk about it in the room where it had been happening, but part of me wanted to see if saying it out loud would change anything. She listened quietly. Then she told me I should probably ask a priest to come to the house. I told her I'd think about it. I respect religion, but I've never really been the kind of person who leans on it. Still, the fact that she said it so seriously stayed with me. The next night, nothing happened. But the night after that, it happened again. I was very sleepy, but not asleep. Maybe 75% awake. I knew where I was. I knew what position I was lying in. And just like before, I felt something behind me. The strangest part is that both times it happened, I had been facing the wall, with my back turned toward the room. That detail bothers me more than I want to admit. After that, almost a week passed with nothing. I started thinking maybe it was over. I took a few precautions, changed how I slept, kept lights closer, tried not to face the wall anymore. For a few days, life felt normal again. Then today, it started up again. And this time, I wasn't even home. I was with some friends at another apartment I own. We were just hanging out, talking about random stuff, and eventually the conversation drifted into paranormal stories. So I told them mine. I told them about the sounds, the feeling in my room, the things that had happened at night. About an hour later, we decided to leave and go walk around the city for some air. My apartment is on the 3rd floor. Usually when we leave, my friends wait for me while I lock up. But this time, for some reason, they all rushed ahead and went downstairs without me. The moment they were about 2 floors below, the hallway lights flickered. Not once. Twice. And I just remember thinking, absolutely not. I locked the door as fast as I could and got out of there. Later, we all headed home. I called a ride, got dropped off near my street, and started walking toward my house. Now, my house is strange. It's basically one building split into two halves. My side is lived in, but the other half is abandoned. Empty. Dark. The kind of place you try not to look at too long when you pass it at night. Right in front of that abandoned half, under the streetlight, I saw something. It was completely black. At first, I couldn't understand what I was looking at. It was standing partly in the light and partly in the shadows. From the waist up, I couldn't see anything clearly. It was swallowed by darkness. But the lower half was visible enough. It looked like a torso with 3 legs. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds impossible. But I stood there about 5 meters away, staring at it for a few seconds, trying to make my brain correct the image into something normal. It didn't. One of the legs moved, and when it moved, it almost looked like it was splitting or bending in a way that didn't belong to a person or an animal. Usually, when something like this happens, I freeze. My stomach drops, my skin crawls, and I get this wave of sickness through my whole body. But this time, I felt nothing. That might be the scariest part. I just stared at it. Then I unlocked my door, stepped inside, locked it behind me, and went straight to the window to look out. Whatever it was gone. I never really believed in ghosts. I mean, I grew up with the idea of spirits in a church sense, but when it came to haunted houses, shadow figures, cryptids, all of that, my brain always had one foot planted firmly in logic. Still, I was fascinated by it. Completely fascinated. When I was a kid, my cousin lived near a cemetery, and I remember sneaking in there sometimes, half scared and half hoping I'd see something. A ghost, a shape, anything. But nothing ever happened. I live in the Pacific Northwest too, so whenever I'm out in the forest, some tiny part of me is always looking between the trees for Bigfoot, just in case. But again, nothing. So my rational mind kept winning. And yet, there I was, still wearing Mothman shirts, still watching every grainy cryptid video online, still reading about things I didn't fully believe in, but couldn't stop thinking about. Then things started getting strange. I met a woman named Marin during a Dungeons & Dragons campaign. She was a practicing satanic priestess, which sounded so over the top at first that I honestly laughed it off. I remember thinking, sure, you're in league with dark forces, but does my armor class save me from this goblin attack? That was basically my attitude. Then she proved it. Twice. I'm going to keep some of the details vague, partly out of respect, and partly because, even now, she scares me in a way I don't like admitting. There's this feeling I get, even thinking about her, like she'd somehow know. The first time, she told us a man had wronged her by cutting down trees on her property, a place where she practiced. She said very calmly that he would be cut down. About a month later, he was in a terrible accident and lost both legs above the knee. The second time involved a guy I worked with. Nobody could stand him, including her husband, who also worked with me. One day her husband mentioned that Marin had put a curse on him. He said she had taken certain objects, things connected to the situation, and put them in the freezer to cool him off. Over the next few months, that man's entire life fell apart. Not in a minor, bad week kind of way. I mean, everything was uprooted. It was tragic. The kind of thing that forces a person to rebuild from the ground up. You would think I stopped going to their house immediately. I did not. The campaign was really good, and Marin liked me. That probably sounds ridiculous, but it's true. So I kept going for a while. Then one day, I got there before everyone else. We were alone, waiting for the group to show up. and we started talking. The conversation turned to religion, then my childhood faith, then my modern belief that paranormal things were interesting, but probably fictional. She listened quietly. Then she leaned forward and kissed me gently on the forehead. It wasn't romantic at all. It felt almost grandmotherly, like a blessing, or something pretending to be one. She told me it would help me see better. At the time, I didn't know what to do with that, so I just sort of tucked it away in my mind and moved on. Then, not long after, I looked up one day and saw something walking in front of me. A shadow person. Not a blur, not a trick of the eye. A full figure. It looked like a complete void, a person-shaped absence, moving calmly through the room. And somehow, even though it had no face, I felt like it was looking at me. The strangest part was that I didn't feel fear. There was no malice, no threat. It felt almost casual, like it was passing by and saying hello. But my body didn't understand that. My face went cold, and I felt all the blood drain out of me. My rational mind just collapsed in on itself, scrambling for an explanation and finding nothing. After that, as I kept reading and studying more about the paranormal and the occult, I would encounter that presence again. I believe it follows me now. But even with all of that, nothing physical had ever really happened. Not in a way I could point to and say, there, that happened outside my head. Until tonight. I have this lamp in my home office. It belonged to someone who, as far as I know, may or may not be deceased. I've never been totally sure about the history there. It's one of those old glass banker-style lamps, the kind you might imagine on a detective's desk. Every so often, the glass shade turns by itself. Now, of course, there are normal explanations. Gravity, loose hardware, vibrations from footsteps, the house settling. And I understand all of that. But it has always felt intentional. Tonight I was sitting at my computer, with my back to the lamp, when I heard the shade turn over again. Without even looking, I said what I usually say when it happens. Hello. Anyone there who wants to talk? I say it mostly to make myself laugh. It's become a little ritual, a way of pretending I'm braver and less curious than I actually am. But tonight, the lamp turned on. The lamp has a pull chain at the bottom. When you turn it on or off, it makes this loud, ugly little click. You can't miss it. Tonight, there was no click. None. I just saw the light come on. It was smooth, almost like a motion sensor, except this lamp does not work that way. I'm writing this now and I still feel strange, almost outside my own body. After all these years of curiosity, after all the searching and reading and wondering, something finally answered in a way I couldn't explain away. A light came on behind me, and for the first time, it really felt like a message. I'm a 36-year-old man living in Northern Europe. I had a pretty ordinary childhood, really. Middle-income family, stable home, nothing dramatic on the surface. I did well in school, though I never felt like I was trying very hard. Answers just seemed to come to me. I didn't know how I knew certain things, but I did. And at the time, I never questioned it much. As an adult, I became a clinical psychologist with a focus on psychiatry and trauma-related disorders. I got married, had children, bought a house. From the outside, my life probably looks very normal. But I've always felt different. Not lonely exactly, because I've always had close friends and people around me. Just different in a way I could never really explain. And I suppose the reason for that becomes clearer when I talk about what happened when I was younger. It still feels strange saying all of this out loud. My experiences started as far back as I can remember. The first things I saw were lights. Orbs, I guess you could call them. Even thinking about it now gives me goosebumps. But back then, at first, it didn't feel frightening. There was one presence in particular that I somehow felt I could communicate with. I remember seeing it in my bedroom, always as a bright little mass of light moving through the air. Sometimes I'd notice it at preschool too, drifting near the corners of the room or hovering just out of reach. I don't know when it changed, but at some point I became afraid. I stopped seeing things, or maybe I stopped allowing myself to see them. At night, once I closed my eyes, I didn't dare open them again. I often had the feeling that something was watching me. I hated being alone. I hated the silence of my room after everyone else had gone to sleep. When I was around 11, I developed a severe headache that lasted nearly a year. I missed a lot of school. Doctors ran tests, tried different treatments, but nothing helped, and no explanation ever came. Painkillers barely touched it. Honestly, I don't remember much from that period. I remember my parents being scared. I remember the house feeling heavy. And I remember waking up one morning to find a note beside my bed, written in English, in handwriting that looked like mine, though I had no memory of writing it. Eventually, when my parents were nearly out of options, they contacted an older woman named Elna. She was known quietly in our area as someone who worked with things people didn't really talk about. Spiritual things, energy, whatever name you want to give it. She came to the house once, just once, and after that, the pain was gone. For a while after that, things became very strange again. People mostly noticed the cats. Cats would follow me around constantly, even ones I didn't know. It was bizarre, honestly, but also kind of funny. I'd walk somewhere and there would be this little parade of cats trailing behind me like I owed them rent. Then I started feeling something in my hands whenever someone nearby was in pain. A sort of pressure or warmth or buzzing under the skin. I told my mother about it. She was open-minded, much more than the rest of our family. One day, when she had a migraine, I put my hands on her head, and the migraine disappeared. She never had another attack after that. Afterward, I did the same thing for a few relatives. I don't know what to call it. Healing sounds too big, too dramatic, but that's what it seemed like. And it was strange because my family wasn't religious. We weren't spiritual people. We didn't have language for any of it. Things just happened, and then everyone quietly tried to return to normal. A few years later, though, the experiences changed again. I began seeing darker things, violent things, brutal images I didn't want in my mind. I started feeling awful, like something had opened too wide and I couldn't close it. At some point, I made a decision. I was still young, but I remember it clearly. I decided I was going to shut it all down, lock it away, refuse to look. And in a way, it worked. I don't see things anymore, not directly, but I still feel them sometimes. Now, working in psychiatry, I've met certain patients who describe experiences that sound painfully familiar. They talk about lights, orbs, but more often they talk about shadows, figures watching them, and the details are what unsettle me. The same details again and again. A tall shape, a hat, something standing in the corner, something waiting. These patients are treated as mentally ill, and maybe that's the correct framework. I know the diagnostic language. I know the clinical explanations. I use them every day. But there is still a part of me that wonders, because some of them don't sound like the others. Some of them describe things with a clarity that feels different. And when they speak, I recognize what they're talking about. Not intellectually, not professionally. Somewhere deeper than that. I know those shadows. I know those lights. and I know that whatever they are describing is the same thing I once saw, and the same thing I still sometimes feel near me. I just don't look anymore. Hi everyone. I want to tell you about something that happened to me when I was a teenager. I'm 23 now, but back then I was still living with my parents in the house I'd grown up in. We moved there when I was about 7. It wasn't some creepy old place with a strange history, and honestly, nothing unusual had ever happened there before. No footsteps, no shadows, no weird feelings. Just a normal family home. This happened on a Wednesday afternoon. In my country, we didn't have classes on Wednesdays, so I was home by myself. We had an alarm system with a few different settings. You could leave it off completely, turn on the full alarm, or set it to partial mode. Partial mode meant the outside doors, the garage, and my dad's study were protected, but you could still walk around inside the house. Whenever I was alone, I always used the partial alarm. That day, I did exactly that. I was in my bedroom watching a movie when I heard the electric garage door open. A few seconds later, I heard the door from the garage into the study open too. That room was right across from my bedroom, so the sounds were very clear. I immediately thought, okay, Dad's home. I didn't pause the movie or get up. I just waited for him to call out or come say hello, like he usually did. But 10 minutes went by. No hello, no footsteps, nothing. That felt strange, so I got up and checked the house. I looked around, called out, but nobody answered. The study door was closed, just like it should have been with the alarm active. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. My dad usually came home around that time, so maybe my brain had just filled in the blanks. I went back to my room, sat down, and tried to keep watching the movie. A little while later, I decided to go to the bathroom. The bathroom was right next to my bedroom, between my room and the study. I had just reached for the door handle when I heard the coats moving. We had coats hanging on the door between the study and the garage, and I knew that sound perfectly. It was the exact sound they made when someone opened or closed that door and brushed against them. I froze. I mean, completely froze. Those coats shouldn't have been moving. Nobody was supposed to be in that room. The study door was closed, and the motion detector in there was supposed to trigger the alarm if anyone walked around. I stood there for several seconds, trying to explain it away. Maybe a draft? Maybe something settling? Then I heard another sound. The office chair dragged across the floor. Not a vague noise, not a random creak. It was that sharp, familiar scrape of the chair being pushed back. The same sound I had heard hundreds of times when my dad moved it out of the way. That was it for me. My whole body went cold, and I ran out of the house. I called my dad while I was outside and told him I thought someone was inside and that he needed to be careful when he came home. I had dance class shortly after, so I went there still shaking and trying not to think about it. That night, when I came home, I asked my dad if he had found anyone in the house. He said no. Nobody was there. The alarm had never gone off. Nothing looked disturbed. My parents didn't really take it seriously. They listened, but I could tell they thought I had just scared myself. But I know what I heard. To this day, I don't really know what happened. Maybe someone was inside somehow, but then why didn't the alarm go off? Maybe it was something paranormal, but then how did it make such physical sounds, like the coats moving and the chair scraping? Sometimes I wonder if it was some kind of replay, like an echo of a normal routine. Garage door opening, study door opening, coats shifting, chair moving. All the little sounds my dad would make when he came home. Whatever it was, nothing like that ever happened again before I moved out. But after that day, being home alone never felt the same. I've always been skeptical about the paranormal. Not dismissive exactly, just skeptical. I've always found it interesting though. I used to watch those strange videos online and try to figure out the trick behind them. The shadow, the edit, the sound, whatever could explain it. But about 9 years ago, things started happening in my own home that I couldn't explain away so easily. At the time, I was 37, and I had 3 kids. My husband and I, he's my ex now, had moved into this little ground floor apartment. I loved it at first. It felt cozy, simple, the kind of place where I thought we could settle for a while. Then, my middle child, my son Elias, started sleepwalking. At first, I didn't panic. His cousin had done the same thing when he was little, so I told myself it was probably just one of those childhood things. Nothing strange, nothing dramatic. But then, when Elias was about 3, he started asking me, "Who's that man?" And I said, "What man?" He looked at me so calmly and said, "The one with the hat." I thought maybe he meant someone from outside. There was a playground right beside our building, so I asked, "Did you see him at the playground?" And he said, "No, at night, in our home." That made me pause, but I still tried to stay reasonable. I figured maybe he'd had a vivid dream and was too young to separate it from real life. So I asked him what the man looked like, thinking I could gently talk him through it. Elias said, "He's tall, he has pale eyes, and he comes after you leave at night." That was the first moment I felt something cold move through me. I knew I probably shouldn't ask the next question, but I did anyway. I said, "What does he do?" And my son said, "He's mad at you. He looks mad, and he stands there watching us." I tried to explain that it was just a dream. I really did. I told him dreams can feel real, especially when you wake up scared. But he kept insisting it wasn't a dream. He said he couldn't fall asleep until the man went away. A few weeks later, Elias started screaming in his sleep. Not crying, not fussing. Screaming, full terror, like something horrible was happening to him. One night it got so bad that I brought him into our room to sleep beside us. I was already shaken and wide awake, just lying there, listening to him breathe. Then, I heard it. Heavy footsteps in the hallway. Not creaks, not the building settling. Boots. Slow, heavy boots moving through the corridor outside our bedroom. I woke my husband and told him someone was in the apartment. I was completely sure of it. He got up and checked everything. Every room, every corner, the front door, the windows. There was nothing. Nobody was there. For weeks afterward, I tried to find a normal explanation for those sounds. Pipes, neighbors, old flooring, anything. But I know what I heard, and I know I was awake. I wasn't half dreaming. I was too worried about my son to sleep properly at all. And that was when it really began. I was around 8 years old, maybe in 2nd or 3rd grade, when my family moved to this small town in Kentucky, right along the Ohio River. It was one of those places where everything felt old. The streets, the trees, the houses, even the air felt like it had been holding its breath for 100 years. The house we moved into looked ordinary enough from the outside. Nothing dramatic, nothing that screamed run. It had a few charming little details, like this old hand-cranked doorbell by the front door, the kind you had to twist instead of push. But inside my sister and I's bedroom, there was something strange. A trap door. It was built right into the floor, and unless you knew it was there, you would never notice it. That door led down into the cellar, and that cellar was not like any basement I had ever seen. The walls were made of old stone, rough and cold, all mortared together. The floor was coated in this fine black dust. My dad said it was probably coal dust from when people stored coal down there a long time ago. But the walls were what stayed with me. There were thick, rusted chains hanging from them. Heavy cuffs, too, spaced out every few feet. And there were these big metal rings anchored into the stone, with huge iron balls attached at the ends. They looked awful. Not decorative. Not random. Later, we were told the cellar had once been used to hold people who had escaped slavery. After that, the whole house felt different. At first, it was little things. We would come home and the shower would be running, or the kitchen faucet would be on full blast. There were 4 of us kids, so of course we got blamed for it. Then the lights started flickering. Not just a soft flicker either. I mean violent, flashing, almost like a strobe light. My dad kept saying it had to be bad wiring because the house was old, but nobody ever found a real electrical problem. Then we would come home from school and find our toys dumped all over the floor. Coloring books ripped apart, crayons snapped in half. And again, we got punished for it. Then one night, while we were sitting at dinner, we all heard this old-fashioned bell ringing through the house. It echoed from room to room. And yes, it was coming from that hand-cranked doorbell. The strange part was, that bell had been painted over so many times that it couldn't be turned. My dad had tried before. He used pliers, screwdrivers, everything. That thing would not move. But now it was ringing. After that, it got worse. Almost every night, right around 3 in the morning, the doorbell would start ringing. Back then, we didn't have cameras everywhere like people do now, so my dad actually stayed up outside, trying to catch whoever was doing it. He never saw anyone. Not once. Then we started hearing the chains. The bell would ring, and then from beneath our bedroom floor, we would hear those chains slamming against the cellar walls. Bang, drag, bang. It was the kind of sound that made your whole body go cold before your brain even understood why. We were so scared that we begged our dad to push a dresser over the trap door, just so nothing could come up through it. Eventually, all 4 of us kids started sleeping together in one full-size waterbed because nobody wanted to be alone. Things kept happening. Stuff vanished. Lights went wild. Faucets turned on. The refrigerator door would be left wide open. And my parents started changing too. They became angrier, harsher. They kept accusing us kids of causing everything, even when we swore we hadn't touched a thing. Then one morning, everything broke loose. My older sister, Marla, used to get up early to do her hair. This was the 80s, so hair was a serious project. Curl it, tease it, spray it until it could survive a windstorm. Half a can of Aquanet was basically the entrance fee. That morning she switched on the lamp. The bulb exploded. It woke all of us up instantly. Then the waterbed started moving. Not a little ripple. It was shaking and rolling so hard we could barely get off it. At the same time, the chains in the cellar started slamming against the stone walls. Loud, violent, metal-on-rock crashes. Then we heard heavy thumps on the wooden cellar stairs, like something was coming up. The trapdoor shook so hard that the dresser we had pushed over it toppled across the floor. All 4 of us were screaming. My mom came running down the hall, but just as she reached our room, the bedroom door slammed shut in her face. She couldn't get in. We couldn't get out. Then everything in the room seemed to go crazy. Toys started moving. Papers whipped around in the air. Books flew off shelves and slammed into the walls. My brother's remote control car started tearing across the floor by itself. And I remember seeing my light bright move. It didn't just slide. It skittered across the floor like some little plastic animal. That image has never left me. I covered my ears, squeezed my eyes shut, and screamed for my mom. The noise was everywhere. The chains, the banging, the toys, all of us crying. And then, just like that, it stopped. The room went still. The bedroom door flew open. We left immediately. No packing, no discussion. We were still in our pajamas. I never stepped foot in that house again. And to this day, I cannot look at a light bright without feeling like something cold is crawling up my back. My mom and I have always had a real interest in the paranormal. Not in a silly way either. It's something we've been drawn to for years. Before my son was born, we used to go on paranormal investigations together with people who actually knew what they were doing. We'd visit old buildings, listen for strange sounds, watch for things we couldn't explain. And when we weren't doing that, we were usually at home watching paranormal shows. Reenactments, documentaries, investigations, all of it. So this one night, we were sitting together on the sofa like we often did, watching a show called Haunted Stays. It was one of those programs where they tell a story and then paranormal experts weigh in afterward. During one part of the episode, one of the experts said something about why people should never mess around with Ouija boards, demons, or anything that might invite something in. I turned to my mom and said, "I wouldn't ever mess with that sort of thing. Would you?" She looked at me and, in that joking way she has, said, "Yeah, I probably would." Now, I knew she was joking. I really did. But something about it made me uneasy straight away. I told her, "Don't joke like that. Seriously, you don't know what might take it as an invitation." We had never had anything happen in that house before. No footsteps, no voices, no strange shadows. Nothing. There was no reason for me to think our home was haunted. But I still felt like it was better not to say things like that out loud. Then I started telling her how some people believe spirits or entities can use electricity to make themselves known. My mom just shook her head and said she didn't believe that was possible. I told her again, "Just don't say things like that. Please." And then, not even a minute later, something happened. We were still sitting there watching the television when the top of my left arm suddenly started to burn. It wasn't an ordinary sting. It wasn't like a bug bite or a little scratch. It was this sharp, hot, burning feeling that came out of nowhere. I remember knowing instantly that it wasn't normal. I looked at my mom and said, "My arm is burning. I think something scratched me." I pulled up the sleeve of my shirt, and right there on my skin, a red mark was starting to appear. We both watched it darken in front of us. And it wasn't just a line. It was shaped like a big letter Z. My mom and I froze. I don't think I've ever seen her look that frightened. I know I was terrified because I started shaking. My boyfriend Caleb was in another room at the time, so I got up and went straight to him. I showed him my arm, and he just stared at it. He was completely shocked, too. None of us could explain it. But once the fear hit me, something else came with it. Anger. I was angry that something had come into our home. I was angry that something had hurt me. And I was especially angry because I wasn't even the one who had made the joke. So I stood there and spoke out loud to whatever might have been with us. I said, "You are not welcome here. You have no right to touch me or hurt me. You need to leave this house now." My mom apologized too. She said she was sorry for what she had said, that she had only been joking. After that, we turned the television off. The whole room felt different, like the air had gone too still. Since that night, nothing unseen has ever hurt me again. I've never had another mark appear on my body like that. But I still think about it, because it was honestly one of the most frightening things I've ever experienced. I don't know what came into our home that night. I don't know if it was already there, if it was passing through, or if it somehow took her words as a challenge. And I don't know whether it listened when I told it to leave. What I do know is this: there was no way I scratched myself. My hands were down at my sides while I was watching television. Nobody was sitting close enough to touch me. And the arm that got scratched was against the side of the sofa, right by the wall. So I still wonder about that Z. What did it mean? Why that shape? And why me? I've never really forgotten this, even though it happened years ago when I was still in college. It was around 4 in the morning, and I'd gotten up earlier than usual because exams were coming up. Normally, my friend and I would start studying at 5, but that morning I wanted to get a head start, so I took a quick shower and headed out to wake her up in the next dorm building. Our campus was really dark at that hour. There weren't any streetlights, and the school was pretty far from town, so once you stepped away from the dorm entrances, it was mostly just darkness. The path between our buildings was short, maybe 3 or 4 minutes on foot, with a low hedge along one side and a few scattered trees. I was about a minute away from her dorm when something happened that stopped me cold. Out of nowhere, this bright, almost blinding ball of light appeared behind me and moved into view. It was about the size of a small soccer ball, maybe floating a little above waist height in front of me. I just froze. What scared me most was how silent it was. Completely silent. And even though it was incredibly bright, it didn't seem to light up the whole area the way you'd expect. It was just there, suspended in front of me, almost like it was aware of me somehow. I know that sounds strange, but that's honestly how it felt. I remember this wave of dread coming over me. I felt rooted to the spot, like my body wasn't fully listening to me. I kept telling myself, "Don't just stand here, look away, run." But before I could actually do anything, it started moving. It hovered for a second, then shot off so fast that if I'd blinked, I probably would have thought it vanished. And just like that, the fear eased. I looked around, even checked near the trees to see if it had gone behind one of them, but there was nothing there. No sound, no trace, nothing. After that, I ran the rest of the way to my friend's dorm. But the weirdest part is that when I finally got there, people were already up and moving around, and what should have been a really short walk had somehow taken me close to half an hour. I honestly don't remember standing there for that long, which has always bothered me almost as much as the light itself. I've thought about it so many times over the years. I've seen all kinds of theories online, and the closest thing I ever found was something called ball lightning. That description felt oddly similar to what I saw, but I still don't know whether that fully explains it. So I guess I'm sharing this because I still wonder about it. Has anyone else ever seen something like that? Or heard of a logical explanation for an experience like this? So, I want to tell you about something that's been happening to me, because honestly, I still don't fully understand it. A few mornings ago, around 3:18 a.m., I woke up from another terrifying dream. It shook me so badly that I decided I couldn't stay in the boarding house anymore. I packed a few things and went home to stay with my family for a couple of days because I just didn't feel safe being alone. When I got home, my family asked me what was wrong, and I told them everything. I'm from the Philippines, and where I grew up, a lot of people believe there are other beings around us, things we cannot always explain, things we're taught to respect and not disturb. My mother listened carefully, and later that afternoon, around 1:30 p.m., she asked me to go with her because she wanted someone to help figure out what was happening to me. In our culture, there are traditional healers people turn to, when they think something strange or spiritual may be involved. They deal with things people describe as capre, duende, or encanto. Beings were warned not to take lightly. The healer my mother brought me to was among Tatawas. I agreed right away, because by that point, I really wanted answers. The healer began by putting oil on my forehead. Then she pressed a small piece of paper there and started chanting words I didn't understand. Maybe Latin, maybe a prayer. I'm not really sure. After a while, she told me there really was something attached to me. Then she carefully peeled the paper away, and I saw this dark image on it. It looked like shadows inside a house, a woman and a child. And the strange part is, I already felt deep inside that those figures meant something. I didn't even tell the healer what I saw, but she said the presence seemed drawn to me because of my soft features, my round face, my cheeks. She said sometimes entities become attached in ways that don't always make sense to us. Then she asked how I usually sleep, and I told her I often sleep flat on my back. She immediately told me not to do that anymore. She said I should sleep on my side instead, keep a rosary close to me, drink water, and pray before bed every night. After that, she placed her hand on my head and chanted again 3 times. Her voice was calm, but serious. Before we left, she told me very clearly to follow everything she had said. There was one more thing that confused me. She held my hand for a while and looked closely at my palm. Then she said, "It's still connected, so that's good." I didn't understand what she meant at first, but when my mother and I got home, I asked her. She told me the healer was checking whether the lines in my hand were still connected, because if they weren't, it could mean the entity was trying to replace me or take me somewhere else. Hearing that honestly made me feel 2 things at once: relief, because I was still myself, and fear, because even the thought of being replaced was horrifying. Then came the dream that scared me the most. That same night, again around 3:18 a.m., I had another nightmare, but this one felt different. It felt layered, like I was dreaming inside another dream. I share a room with 2 other girls. I'll call them Jessa and Elaine. We have 2 double beds in the room. Elaine and I sleep near the window, with me on the top bunk and her on the lower one. Jessa usually sleeps on the other bed near the door. In the dream, I thought I had already woken up from a nightmare. Elaine was shaking me, telling me to get up, and Jessa was there too. They were both urging me to leave the room. Then suddenly, I woke up again, but I didn't realize I was still dreaming. That's when I knew I was still inside the dream. I tried over and over to force myself awake, but I couldn't. I started panicking. In the dream, I could see myself lying on the bed with my eyes closed, and that alone felt so unnatural that it made me more terrified. I reached for the blanket and pulled it over myself. And then, I heard a voice beside me. It said, "Aren't you going to move and make room for me?" I froze. There was someone lying next to me in that dream, but I couldn't see who it was. I only heard the voice. And when I recognized it, my whole body went cold, because it was my own voice. I tried to scream. In the dream, I was shouting as hard as I could, but no sound came out. I was drenched in sweat, struggling to breathe, completely trapped in that moment. And then, I woke up for real. The first thing I did was grab my phone from beside my charger. My hands were shaking. When I looked at the screen, the time was exactly 3:18 a.m. That was the moment I called my father. I told him everything, and he stayed on the phone with me. He told me he wouldn't hang up and that I should try to sleep again while he stayed there, listening, making sure I wasn't alone. That helped more than I can explain. What really scared me was that this time, I didn't see a black figure. It wasn't a shadow. It was a voice, and it sounded exactly like me. And it keeps following the same pattern. Inside the dream, I realize I'm dreaming, but I still can't wake myself up. That's why I'm so confused. I don't feel especially stressed. I don't feel deeply anxious. I even have an exam coming up, but in my heart I've actually felt peaceful lately. And still, this keeps happening. When I looked at myself in the mirror that morning, I looked exhausted. My eyes looked like they had given up. But I was too scared to sleep again because I was afraid it would come back. That's the part I can't understand. Why does it keep happening? It's been going on for a long time, but lately, it feels like it's getting worse. I pray every day. I pray before I sleep, when I wake up, and before I leave the house. I hold on to my faith, and still these nightmares come back so vividly that sometimes, in the middle of them, I feel like I'm dying. And honestly, I still don't know what to do. I was about 7, maybe 8, the first time I ever stayed overnight at a friend's place. Or, well, I was supposed to stay overnight. My friend's name was Mika, and that evening it was just the two of us and his dad in this small apartment. At some point, not long before it got dark, his dad said he had to step out for a quick errand and left us there alone. For Mika, that wasn't really a big deal. His dad worked a lot, and he was used to being by himself for stretches of time. I wasn't, but at first I was too excited to think much about it. We were sitting in the living room, playing handheld games and watching videos on a tablet, just completely wrapped up in our own little world. Then, during one quiet pause, we noticed music coming from the kitchen. There was this old radio sitting on the counter, something Mika's dad had brought back from a trip years earlier. We figured he must have forgotten to switch it off before leaving, so we just walked in there, turned it off, and didn't think twice about it. After that, we made these frozen yogurt treats, the kind where you pour yogurt into little molds with sticks and leave them in the freezer until they turn into something like popsicles. We were very proud of ourselves for that. Then we went back to the living room and kept playing. A while later, when we decided the yogurt pops were probably ready, Mika said he'd go get them. He walked toward the kitchen, but then he stopped halfway down the hall, turned around, and came right back. I still remember his face. He looked pale. He said, really quietly, that he didn't want to go in there alone because something felt wrong. So we went together, and when we stepped into the kitchen, the radio was on again. I know how that sounds, I really do, but I'm still completely sure we had turned it off the first time. We both were. We just stood there staring at it for a second, not saying anything, because suddenly the whole apartment felt different, like the air had changed. We grabbed our frozen yogurt pops as fast as we could, switched the radio off again, and went straight back to the living room. This time we shut the door behind us and turned our video up way louder than before, like somehow noise could make us feel safer. Neither of us wanted to go back into the kitchen after that. When Mika's dad finally came home, we stayed put until he opened the living room door. And the first thing he did was scold us because the radio in the kitchen was on again. Not just on, apparently, blasting. That was the part that really got to me, because we hadn't gone back in there. Not long after that, my mom came to pick me up earlier than planned. She'd gotten off work sooner than expected, and honestly, I was relieved to leave. So that sleepover ended before bedtime even came around. What makes this story stranger is that I don't remember every detail perfectly. A lot of it came back because Mika and I talked about it years later on a call, and we ended up piecing it together between the two of us. Both of us remembered the same feeling, though. That kitchen, that radio, that moment when it turned back on, and neither of us wanted to admit how scared we were. Mika moved away not too long after, and his dad got rid of the radio when they left. Nothing else ever happened, at least not that I heard. But even now, I still think about how certain I was when I pressed that off button the first time. You know, one of the strangest parts of my childhood happened in the very first apartment my family ever lived in. It was me, my mom, my dad, and my little brother. And we lived in this 5-story apartment building that had originally been built by a bank. Our apartment was near the very top, with nothing above us except the roof and the open sky. Years later, when I got older, maybe around 16 or so, I started asking my mom about the different places we had lived. Every single time that first apartment came up, she would tell me these unsettling stories about things that happened there. Some of them happened to her, and some of them happened to me when I was too young to even remember. One story she always told me was from when I was still a baby, so little that I couldn't walk or talk yet. During the coldest winter nights, she would bundle me up in these thick wool clothes, really tight around the neck, the kind that were hard to put on and even harder to take off. She'd tuck me into bed, make sure I was warm, and go to sleep. But then in the morning, she would find me lying on the floor with all the wool clothes taken off, completely off. And the weird thing is, there's no way a baby that small could have done that alone. Honestly, even when I was older, in elementary school, I still struggled to get those kinds of clothes on and off by myself. She said this kept happening again and again until she finally bought me a necklace with Ayat al-Kursi engraved on it, because in our belief, it offers protection from jinn. After that, according to her, it just stopped. No more waking up like that. Not long after, when my parents were finally able to afford it, we moved out of that apartment. Sometimes I still wonder what was going on. Maybe something was messing with me. I really don't know. My mom also used to tell me about the early mornings, around Fajr prayer time, when my dad would leave for the mosque and she'd be alone in the apartment with me as a little child. She said she would hear these loud noises coming from above us, heavy thumping, like animals running around, mixed with the sounds of cats screeching and dogs barking. But that's what made it so creepy. There was nothing above us except the roof. No upstairs neighbors. No nearby building close enough for the sound to make sense. Just the roof and the sky. And then there was something else she swore she saw more than once. She said one time she looked down the hallway and saw a little girl just standing there in the middle of it. Not moving, not speaking, just standing there. My mom said she forced herself to ignore it because she believed that if she showed fear, whatever was there would only bother her more. The one thing I personally remember most clearly happened when I was around 6. My parents had gone out to the pharmacy for a little while and left me and my little brother at home. To keep us from getting into trouble, they locked us in their room. There was this wall calendar in there with a picture of a family exchanging gifts. Just a normal flat picture, nothing special. But the moment my parents left, I swear that picture changed. The people in it started turning their heads and looking right at me, and smiling. Not a nice smile either, a really unsettling one. I panicked and ran to hide inside the wardrobe, but my little brother just stayed where he was like nothing was happening. He didn't seem bothered at all. And every time I peeked through the wardrobe door, those people in the picture would still be looking straight at me, like they knew exactly where I was. I've got to be honest, this still feels strange to talk about. For a long time, I kept wondering whether I imagined it all, or whether something really did happen to me. I've had a few experiences I still can't explain, but this one was by far the strongest. This happened around 7 years ago, when I was about 21. At the time, I was living in an apartment with my brother and a couple of friends. About a week earlier, a friend had offered me DMT. I'd never tried anything like that before, and when I did, almost nothing seemed to happen. I remember closing my eyes and seeing this brief, odd visual, but it vanished within seconds. What stayed with me was this feeling. That's the only way I know how to describe it. A presence, almost. Subtle but completely real to me. I wasn't someone who meditated or did anything spiritual back then, but for some reason I started sitting quietly and focusing on that feeling. The more I did it, the more unsettled I became. Every day it felt like I was drifting farther from what I thought of as normal. I started sensing presences around me, like I wasn't alone even when I clearly was. Then one afternoon, nobody else was home. I was sitting alone in the kitchen upstairs, perched on a stool by the counter, with the stairs behind me. And all at once, that feeling came back, but this time it was so much stronger than before. It didn't feel internal anymore. It felt like it was in the room with me. And I know this sounds wild, but I actually said out loud, without turning around, "Come closer." Right after that, I heard something on the stairs. Footsteps. A faint metallic sound too, like chains or something brushing against the steps. I froze, but I didn't look. Part of me didn't want to break whatever was happening, so I said it again. "Come closer." And the feeling intensified. It really did seem like something was moving toward me. The air felt charged, almost electric. My whole body started trembling, not from fear exactly, but from the sheer intensity of it. It felt like standing near something unbelievably powerful. Then I felt hands on my shoulders. The second that happened, it was like a surge of electricity shot from the base of my spine all the way to the top of my head. And when it reached my head, I saw this image in my mind, a flower opening, blooming. Then suddenly, I was seeing myself from behind. I was looking at my own body from something else's point of view. I could see my own shoulders, and resting on them were these dark, furry hands, almost like paws. In that vision, I was wearing some kind of robe or cloak, and whatever I was seeing through, it didn't seem human. It had pointed black ears, almost fox-like or canine. I know how unbelievable that sounds. I do, but that is exactly what I experienced. After that, things get blurry. I remember my brother, whose name is Mason, coming home not too long later, but I didn't say anything to him about what had happened. That night, we had to drive up the canyon to the ski resort where we both worked. It was some anniversary event, maybe the 80th or so, and I drove us there in his truck. The whole drive, I felt completely different, hyper-aware, like I could feel the flow of everything around me, the rhythm of the traffic, the movement of the cars ahead of us and behind us, like there was some invisible current connecting everything. But the strongest thing I felt was my brother's anxiety. And I swear, I had already felt it before he did that. I could sense it rising in him. When we got to the resort, I ended up in the employee lounge while people were coming and going. Some were off the clock and drunk already. Others were just on break. I sat in a corner, completely sober, still holding on to that same strange awareness. And then something else happened. I started seeing people in a way I can barely explain. I could still see the room normally, but layered over that, almost in my mind's eye, but with my eyes open too, I could see what looked like a glowing sun inside each person. Bright orange and yellow, burning, with little flares coming off of it. When two people talked, those flares would reach toward each other and interact. Then, when the energy between them stopped, a few seconds later, one of them would drift away or start talking to somebody else. I watched it happen over and over. After a while, I realized I could tell when an interaction was about to end before it actually did. I've thought about that moment so many times since then, and if I wasn't losing my mind, the only way I know how to describe it is that I felt like I was seeing something essential in people. Their core, their spirit maybe, something underneath the surface. I never had another experience that intense again. After that, it was mostly just waves of anxiety from time to time, like I had touched something I didn't know how to understand. It felt like I had opened a door and then lost the ability to make sense of what was on the other side. The last time I ever felt that same energy was much later, when I was at a fast casual restaurant with a friend. For some reason, I stopped one of the workers, a young woman behind the counter, and started talking to her. I honestly can't even remember what we talked about. It wasn't important. But while I was speaking to her, I felt this current between us, like a live wire. Not metaphorically, something tangible, almost visible in the corner of my mind. She looked stunned. Her eyes were wide, and she seemed distracted, almost frozen. She barely responded, like she was feeling something too, but couldn't quite process it. My friend was standing a few feet away, and the second I finished talking to her, he looked at me and said, "What was that?" He told me he could feel something between us too, strongly, and he had the same unsettled look in his eyes that she did. That's the one thing I've always come back to, because if it had only been me, I probably would have convinced myself it was all in my head. But the fact that someone else noticed something, really noticed it, has always stayed with me. So I still don't know what happened. I don't know whether it was spiritual, psychological, or something else entirely. I just know it felt real. And even now, years later, part of me still wonders what exactly I touched that day, and why it touched back. So when I was about 8 or 9, there was this little grocery store just down the street from my house called Willow Park Market. It had been there forever, and even as a kid, you could kind of feel that. It had this old, lived-in energy that made it feel charming during the day, and a little unsettling once you started thinking too hard about it. My family knew the owners really well. Back then, it was run by a couple named Kara and Brent. They'd fixed the place up and were incredibly kind to us. We were close enough that they'd sometimes let me come behind the counter or hang around in the back room while my mom chatted with them. One day, Kara told my mom and me that something strange had been happening in the store. I remember the way she said it too. She wasn't joking around. She looked genuinely rattled. She said she'd been hearing odd noises coming from the back room. Cupboards shutting by themselves, dishes falling for no clear reason, that kind of thing. Now, Brent didn't buy any of it. He thought there had to be a normal explanation, probably a draft, or the windows being open, or maybe the fan moving things around. But Kara was convinced it was something else. And me, being a kid who absolutely believed in ghosts, was equal parts terrified and fascinated. So she took me into the back room with her. We were only in there for a few minutes, and I still remember how quiet it felt right before it happened. Then suddenly, this big chalkboard that had been mounted to the wall came crashing straight down onto the floor. I screamed and ran out of there as fast as I could, just completely panicked. Kara came running out right behind me, and we told my mom and Brent what had happened. Both of us were really shaken. Even now, that moment is still so vivid in my mind. And sure, maybe there was a logical reason. Maybe the windows were open. Maybe something had come loose. But I still can't explain how a chalkboard that was fixed to the wall just dropped like that, right while we were standing there talking about weird things happening. It felt too perfectly timed to brush off. There was something else about that store that always got under my skin, too. They had this old black and white photo hanging up, from way back in the day, showing a group of people standing outside the shop. But right in the middle was this one girl who looked strangely blurred. almost like she didn't belong in the picture at all. Every time I looked at it, I got this weird little chill. And then years later, the whole thing got even eerier. The store changed hands and was renamed by the new owner. But not long after taking over, he passed away suddenly inside the shop. I don't know. Maybe none of it means anything. Maybe it's all coincidence, and my memory just wraps it in more mystery because I was a kid when it happened. But even now, when I think back on that little store, that falling chalkboard, and that blurry girl in the photograph, it still gives me chills. This happened to me close to 20 years ago, back when I was living out in a very remote part of eastern Montana. It's one of those memories that still bothers me, because even now, I can't make it fit into any normal explanation. It was a Saturday afternoon, a little after 4, when I suddenly remembered I had library books due that day. The library closed at 5, and where I lived, that was just enough of a problem to make me panic a little. If I took the highway, it was about 45 minutes, but there was a back road, a dirt road that cut through ranch land, and that could shave a few minutes off the drive. So I took the shortcut. I was driving a big SUV that belonged to the school where I worked, and I was moving pretty fast because I wanted enough time to return my books and maybe grab a couple more before the library shut down. That dirt road wasn't deserted, exactly. During the day, you'd usually pass at least a car or two. Not crowded by any means, but not completely empty either. At one point, I came around a bend in the road, and all at once, this scene appeared in front of me. On the right side of the road, there was a pickup truck parked at an odd angle, almost perpendicular to the road, up against a barbed wire fence. It looked like the front of the truck was pressed right into it. Beyond the fence, on the side where the cattle would have been, there was a man in a pale t-shirt and jeans, kneeling on the ground. He was sitting back on his heels, looking down at something in front of him. I could see him from the side as I approached, and what struck me immediately was that he didn't react at all. Not to my engine, not to my vehicle flying past. Nothing. Then, on the road side of the fence, half hidden in what looked like tall grass, I saw another man lying on his back right next to the road. I couldn't make out all of him clearly, just enough to tell he was stretched out parallel to the road, with his head angled back toward the truck. One of his arms was raised, and he was waving it slowly. Not like someone cheerfully flagging a car down. More like someone dazed, weak, injured. The motion was jerky and faint. My immediate thought was that I'd just come upon some kind of accident. But the thing is, there was no obvious wreckage. No broken fence, no debris, no skid marks. I hadn't had to veer around the truck. Still, the man in the grass looked like he needed help, and for a moment I thought I should stop. The problem was, it all happened so suddenly. By the time my mind caught up with what I'd seen, I'd already driven past it. I couldn't see the scene anymore in my mirror, and I started trying to make sense of it as I kept going. I remember thinking, if that man was hurt badly enough to be lying there waving for help, why wasn't the other man doing anything? Why wasn't he standing, shouting, looking at me, signaling me down? Why was he just kneeling there, completely still? And if there had been an accident, where were the signs of it? What had even happened? I told myself I'd stop once I got to town and let the sheriff know. The sheriff's office happened to be in the same building as the library, so that seemed reasonable. But the more I thought about it on the drive, the less sense the whole thing made. I started second-guessing myself. I convinced myself that maybe another car would come along soon and check on them if something was really wrong. So I didn't report it. I went into the library, dropped off my books, picked out a few more, and by the time I left, it was just about closing time. The sun was down by then, and I had this awful, guilty feeling in my stomach. I did not want to go back down that dirt road in the dark and risk coming across that same scene again, so I took the highway home instead, and that's where it became genuinely unsettling. I drove the full length of that road, then turned around and drove it again. There was no sign of an accident anywhere. But more than that, there was no place along that road where a truck could have been parked between the road and the fence the way I had seen it. The fence ran very close to the roadside the whole way through. In most places, there wasn't room for a truck to sit there without blocking the road completely. And I know for a fact I had not needed to swerve around anything. Then I noticed something even stranger. There was no tall grass. Not anywhere. The roadside was all sparse, high desert scrub, low to the ground, patchy, and dry. There was nothing even close to the kind of grass that could have hidden most of a grown man's body from view. If someone had been lying there, especially from my higher viewpoint in that SUV, I would have seen him clearly. But that isn't what I saw. I saw an arm rising above thick grass, slowly waving. And there shouldn't have been any grass there at all. That's the part I still can't get past. It wasn't just that the men were strange, or the truck was strange. It was the land itself, the fence line, the roadside, the vegetation. The whole scene looked wrong compared to what was actually there. So to this day, I don't know what I witnessed. I've run through every explanation I can think of. Maybe I misunderstood what I saw. Maybe stress or speed or the angle of the road played tricks on me. Maybe something stranger happened. I honestly don't know. But whatever it was, it has stayed with me all these years because I know I saw something that afternoon. I can still picture it clearly. And the worst part is, it was something that shouldn't have been there at all. I don't really know how to explain this without sounding completely unhinged, but I need to tell somebody exactly how it's been happening. The first week or two after I moved in, everything felt normal, quiet even. I actually remember thinking maybe this place was finally going to be peaceful. Then, not long after that, I started hearing footsteps at night. Not normal house noises either. I know what creaking pipes sound like. I know what settling wood sounds like. This was different. These were slow, uneven footsteps, like someone dragging one foot slightly behind the other, moving across the floor just outside my room. The first time I heard it, I was half asleep and tried to brush it off. But then it happened again the next night, and then again a few nights later. Now it's almost every night. It always starts late, usually well after midnight, when the whole house is dead quiet. I'll be lying there in bed, completely still, listening to this awful sound move somewhere in the hallway or the living room. I can never tell exactly where, just that it's inside. Definitely inside. And lately it's louder, closer, more deliberate. It used to be an occasional thing. Now it feels like it waits for me to settle down before it starts. I should probably say this because I know where people's minds go. I have OSDD and narcolepsy. I've dealt with both for years. I know what my own symptoms feel like. I know what sleep-related hallucinations are like, and this is not that. When I hear these footsteps, I'm awake. Fully awake. I can move, I can think, I can get up and check. And as for the OSDD, I know my own mind well enough to know when something is internal and when it isn't. None of this feels internal. If anything, the quiet in my own head has been the weirdest part. Usually there's always some mental noise, some sense that I'm not alone with my thoughts. But during all of this, it's like every part of me has gone dead silent. Like even my own mind is too scared to speak. Every time I hear the footsteps, I force myself to get up and look. I'll grab this heavy metal bar I keep beside the bed now, open my door as carefully as I can, and the second I do, the sound stops. Every single time. Just instant silence. Not even a final creak. It's like whatever was there knows I'm coming. Then I check everything. Every room, every closet, the bathroom, behind the shower curtain, under the bed, places that don't even make sense. Nothing. Doors locked, windows locked, no sign of anyone. But the second I step into that dark hallway, I feel it. I feel like I'm being watched. Not in a vague, anxious way. I mean so strongly that the back of my neck prickles and my throat tightens. Like something is standing just out of sight, waiting for me to notice. There's one detail that didn't bother me before, but it does now. My bedroom door has a deadbolt on the inside. Not a regular lock. A real deadbolt that only works from my side. When I first noticed it, I laughed about it with a friend. I made some dumb joke about the previous tenant being scared of monsters. Now I lock it every single night without fail, sometimes before the sun's even fully down. And even with that deadbolt, I still don't feel safe. And it's not only the noises. Things in the house have started changing places. At first, I doubted myself. I thought maybe I was groggy, maybe I'd set something down without thinking. But it keeps happening with things I'm obsessive about. My keys are the best example. I always hang them on the hook by the front door. Always. I'm weirdly strict with myself about it because I hate losing them. A couple weeks ago, I went to grab them and they were gone. I found them on the kitchen counter. I told myself maybe I'd been distracted. Then it happened again, except this time they were on the coffee table. I know I hung them up. I remember doing it. I live alone. There's nobody here to move them. A few days ago, I came home from lunch with my dad's side of the family and found one of my kitchen cabinets standing wide open. That might sound small, but I never leave cabinets open. Ever. It was drilled into me growing up to close everything properly, and it stuck. Seeing that cabinet open made my blood run cold in a way the footsteps somehow hadn't. Because suddenly, I wasn't just scared of the nights. I was scared that something had been here while I was gone. I searched the whole house with a kitchen knife in my hand, like that was going to do anything. Every room, every window, every lock, under furniture, behind doors. Nothing. No sign of forced entry. No broken latch. No open window. After that, I put up those cheap little alarms on the doors and windows. They haven't gone off once. Then there's the garage light. I don't even use the garage much. One evening, I put some yard tools away, turned off the light, locked the door, and that was that. The next day, my dad stopped by to drop off a hoodie I'd left at his place, and he casually mentioned that my garage light was on. I swear to you, I did not leave that light on. I know I didn't. And that one really got to me because there was no reason for that door to even be opened. I've also had weird issues with the smart bulbs in my bedroom, but I used to write that off as tech being glitchy. They'd sometimes come back on after disconnecting from the router. But lately, I keep thinking about how easy it would be for somebody to make it look like a glitch. Flip the switch off, then back on, and the light comes alive again like nothing happened. Once that thought got into my head, I haven't been able to shake it. That's the worst part of all this. It's escalating. It started as footsteps every now and then. Now it's footsteps almost nightly, tapping at my door, things being moved, cabinets left open, lights changing. It feels like something is getting bolder, like it's testing how far it can go. I can't shake the feeling that I'm being observed, especially at night. Not metaphorically, literally, like there are eyes on me somewhere in the dark. I keep wishing I had a dog, just so I wouldn't feel like the only living thing in this house. I actually caught myself almost saying my dog had been acting strange, but I don't even have one. That's how fried my nerves are. I've started imagining the comfort of another heartbeat in the room. I haven't really told anyone in my actual life because what am I supposed to say? Hey, I think something is sneaking around my house at night, but every time I check, it disappears. People would either think I was losing it or blame my narcolepsy or dissociation. And I get why they would. But I know my own mind. I know what's mine and what isn't. This isn't me. I'm barely sleeping now. Maybe a couple hours a night if I'm lucky. I dread the silence after midnight because that's when I know I'll start listening for it. Every tiny sound makes my heart jump. Some nights, I sit in the corner of my bedroom with the deadbolt locked and that metal bar in my hands, just waiting. My own home feels less like a home and more like a trap. And once, just once, I could have sworn I heard someone whisper my name from another room. That only happened a single time, so maybe that one really was my fear getting to me. I don't know, but it scared me enough that I still think about it. What terrifies me most is that whatever this is, it doesn't feel random. It feels patient, like it's hiding on purpose, like it knows exactly how to stay just out of sight while letting me know it's there. Sometimes I get this awful feeling that it hasn't actually tried to hurt me because it doesn't need to yet. Like it's waiting. Like one day I'm going to turn around and finally see someone standing there. Or I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night and the footsteps won't stop at my bedroom door. I'm exhausted. I'm scared all the time. I left a bad situation to have a place of my own, and now I don't even feel safe here. I don't know whether I should call the police, set up the cameras, stay with someone else for a while, or just grab a bag and leave. I hate that it's come to this. I waited so long for a home that felt like mine. Now every night I lie awake wondering whether I'm going to make it to morning, or whether this thing, whatever it is eventually going to stop hiding. Ever since my dad passed away in 2018, I've carried this constant feeling of unease. It's hard to explain, but it's like the house never felt quite the same after that. The first time something happened that really shook me was about 2 years later. I was asleep in bed, and I woke up in the middle of the night, probably around 2 or 3 in the morning. That part wasn't unusual for me back then, because I used to wake up a lot and struggle to fall back asleep. So I just lay there, listening to the sounds outside and the normal little noises the house made. Our house is older, built back in the 80s, and the hardwood floors creak all the time. So at first I didn't think much of it when I heard cracking downstairs. But then it started to sound less like the floor settling and more like actual footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone was coming up the stairs. A little bit of context makes this worse. After my dad died, my mom started locking the door at the top of the staircase, the one that separates the stairs from the hallway where our bedrooms are. She said she just didn't feel as safe anymore. So I'm lying there, listening, and the sound comes all the way up the stairs and stops right at that door. I remember telling myself, okay, it's just the house. It's just the wood. But then I heard the doorknob, clear as day. It wasn't just a little rattle either. It sounded like someone was pressing it down and shaking it hard, like they were trying to get in. I froze, completely froze. I was still just a kid, and I didn't know what to do. My mom and my brother didn't wake up, which still confuses me, because to me it sounded so loud. I just shut my eyes and stayed as still as I could, hoping whatever it was would stop. The next morning, I told my mom, and she tried to brush it off. She said maybe it was just a letter going into the mailbox. But at 2 in the morning? That explanation never sat right with me. After that, things only seemed to get stranger, or maybe I just became more aware of them. Over the years, I started noticing all kinds of things that made me feel like I was never really alone in that house. Sometimes it felt like something brushed against my shoulder when no one was there. Once, both my brother and I heard a voice downstairs, even though my mom was outside in the garden. I'd get this sudden, heavy feeling of being watched. I'd hear footsteps when I was home alone. Our dog, Daisy, would stare at random corners of the room with her ears straight up like she was listening to something we couldn't hear. And then there were the little things that made it even harder to ignore. Objects would disappear and turn up in places none of us had put them. I'd catch movement out of the corner of my eye and turn, but nothing would be there. Sometimes a room would suddenly go ice cold, even though the windows were shut and it was the middle of summer. I honestly don't know what's happening. I just know I'm exhausted by it. I'm at the point where I'm scared to move around the house by myself, and every time I try to tell someone, they act like I'm just imagining it because I watch too many scary videos. But I know what I felt. I know what I heard. And crazy or not, it was real to me. So there's this odd thing that happened to me when I was a kid, probably when I was about 9, sometime around 2009 or so. It wasn't exactly scary while it was happening, more just unsettling in a way I didn't understand until much later. Even now, I still catch myself thinking about it sometimes, trying to figure out what really happened. That summer, I was staying at my uncle's house out in a quiet rural area, far from the city. My parents were busy with work, and my uncle and his family had gone away for a couple of days, so I was by myself during the daytime. The house sat on a large piece of land with a fenced yard, and back then there weren't many neighboring houses nearby. It felt isolated, but not in a bad way, just peaceful. One thing I remember clearly is that the front gate was always kept locked, and it wasn't the kind you could just push open from inside. You needed a key from the outside, so nobody could really come and go easily. Because of that, we usually left the front door open during the day to let air in. It felt completely normal and safe. I was inside watching TV, probably cartoons, when I suddenly heard movement right near the front entrance. It sounded like footsteps or someone shifting around just outside the door. I got up right away because it caught me off guard. When I looked over, I saw a little girl standing just beyond the open doorway, right at the top step. She had pale blonde hair, almost golden in the sunlight, and she looked about my age, maybe a little younger. She was wearing simple, ordinary clothes, nothing unusual at all. I can't remember her face very well now, not in detail anyway, but I do remember how the sunlight fell across her and how calm she seemed. Not creepy, not threatening, just very quiet. I asked her who she was and what she was doing there. She told me she lived somewhere nearby, though she didn't say exactly where, and she never gave me her name. At the time, I didn't think much of that. I was a kid, so I just accepted it. I invited her inside. I said she could come watch TV with me or hang out for a bit, but she smiled politely and said no. We stood there talking for a few minutes anyway. I really wish I could remember the conversation word for word, but I can't. I only remember the feeling of it, how normal it seemed in the moment. Then, while we were standing there, this sudden gust of wind blew through the porch. There was a wind chime hanging above the door, and it started clinking loudly all at once. I remember both of us glancing up at it. That moment has stayed with me for some reason. It gave everything this strange, suspended feeling, like time paused for a second. After a little while, she told me she had to go. I said goodbye, and she walked off around the side of the house, heading in the direction of the gate. At first, I just watched her go. Then maybe 30 seconds later, it hit me. How was she supposed to leave? The gate was still locked. There wasn't any easy way in or out unless an adult opened it. So I ran after her, around the side of the house toward the back gate. She was gone. Not out on the road, not by the fence, nowhere in the yard. And the gate was still shut and locked, exactly the way it had been before. I remember just standing there, confused, trying to make it make sense. There really wasn't enough time for her to disappear the way she did. I still think about it now and then. I wonder why she showed up at all. I wonder why she wouldn't come inside, even though I invited her. And I wonder whether there was some simple explanation I just never saw, or whether it was one of those moments that isn't meant to make perfect sense. I'm not saying it was anything supernatural. Maybe there's a rational answer. But whatever it was, it felt real. And that's the part I've never been able to shake. I think it really began when I was around 8 years old. It was one of those long summer days that feels like it could last forever. I'd been outside with my parents from morning until evening, just running around, playing, doing all the little things that make a kid feel completely happy. Even back then, I was already attached to screens more than I should have been. But that day had been different. It felt full in a way I still can't quite explain. By the time night came, I was exhausted. I remember climbing into bed feeling that heavy kind of tired where you know you'll be asleep in minutes. I was lying there thinking about the day, about what we'd done, about my mom and dad, about nothing important and everything at once. And then, right as I was drifting off, I heard it. A horn. Not a car horn. One of those little squeeze bulb horns kids put on bikes. It made this odd, playful sound, kind of high and low at the same time. And it came twice. Same rhythm, back to back. At first, I didn't think much of it. Across from our house, there was a small corner shop, and in the evenings, there were usually still people out there talking, kids riding around, that sort of thing. So I told myself it was probably just some kid fooling around on a bike. I rolled over and went to sleep. A few nights later, it happened again. I was in bed, almost asleep, and this time it was quieter outside. The shop had already closed, and the only sounds left were the occasional cars passing on the main road. I used to sleep with a stuffed bear tucked up near my face, and I remember pressing it against one ear to block out the traffic a little. I was right on the edge of sleep when I heard it again. 2 honks. Same sound, same spacing. That was the first moment it really felt strange to me. I remember thinking, okay, maybe this is just some family out for an evening walk. Maybe there's a child nearby who always presses that horn at the same spot. It sounded reasonable enough. Still, something about it stayed with me. I started paying attention after that, quietly waiting to see if it would happen again. And then after I turned 10, it became impossible to ignore. One night I was supposed to be in bed early because school was starting again the next day. Instead, I was up later than I should have been, sitting there on my tablet playing a game for way too long. I was tired, my eyes were heavy, and I was just about to shut everything off and go to bed when I heard it again. Twice. Exactly twice. Same pace, same sound. Like someone had replayed the same little audio clip outside my window. This time, I got up right away. I went to the window and looked out. There was nobody there. No kids, no bikes, no people walking. Not even a passing car. The street was still. Completely still. I remember standing there feeling this cold wave go through me. Not panic exactly, just that weird, hollow feeling you get when something doesn't make sense and you know it should. But I was so tired that after a minute, I just got back into bed and tried not to think about it. The strange thing is, it didn't stop. Eventually, I got used to it. With the windows shut, it wasn't loud enough to be unbearable, especially once the shutters were down. But I could always hear it, clear enough to recognize instantly. And after a while, I stopped being scared of it. I even started joking with myself about it. There were nights when I'd hear those 2 little honks and just smile, like some invisible neighbor was stopping by to say goodnight. As odd as it sounds, it became familiar. Then things changed last year. A tenant who had lived in the apartment above us moved out. Not long after, he passed away very suddenly. A new tenant moved in after that, and somehow, around the same time, the pattern changed too. I still heard the horn now and then, but one evening it happened differently. It honked 3 times. I remember freezing when I heard it, because for all those years it had always been 2. Never 1, never 3, always 2. And after that night, it started fading away. Less often, then barely at all. And now, it's been months since I last heard it. I honestly don't know what it was. I don't know if it had anything to do with the house, the people who lived in it, some strange coincidence, or just someone playing a long, bizarre joke without ever knowing I was listening. I can't explain it. I've tried to, but I still can't. What surprises me most is that I kind of miss it. That sound was part of my nights for nearly 10 years. I'm 18 now, and for so long it was just there, like this tiny mystery that belonged only to me. I never really told anyone because I thought they'd laugh or say it was just my imagination. But I know what I heard, over and over again, for years. And even now, sometimes late at night, I still catch myself listening for it, just in case it comes back. I've carried this memory with me for most of my life, and even now, when I tell it, it still gives me chills. This happened during the 1988 to 1989 school year, when I was in 3rd grade. I was about 8 years old, and I was staying after school for an art class at my elementary school. We were set up in the cafeteria, and at one point I left to go to the bathroom by myself. As I was walking down the hall and turning the corner, I suddenly got that unmistakable feeling that someone was watching me. You know that feeling when the air changes and your whole body picks up on something before your mind does? It was like that. So I turned to look. Standing in the doorway of a classroom near ours was this figure that just did not look human. It was short, maybe around 4 feet tall, very thin, with these unusually long arms and legs. Its head looked much too large for its body, kind of oval-shaped, almost like an egg. The whole silhouette was wrong somehow. Even at that age, I could tell the proportions were off. It wasn't just a small person or another kid. It looked completely unfamiliar. And I was not an easily frightened child. I was actually pretty bold when I was on my own. But the second I saw that figure, I felt terrified in a way I had never felt before. Not just startled, deeply, instinctively scared. Everything about it felt wrong. I ran straight into the bathroom. What's strange is, after that, my memory gets blurry. I assume I used the bathroom because when I came back, I didn't need to go anymore, and I definitely wasn't the kind of kid who would have had an accident. But I honestly can't remember what happened while I was in there. And even stranger, I don't clearly remember how I made it back to the cafeteria. I do remember being scared, and I remember peeking out carefully to see whether that thing was still there. It wasn't. Then I ran back and told the other kids and adults what I'd seen. Somebody there started talking about aliens, and one of the other kids even sketched a picture of what I described. That was the first time I ever heard about the classic gray alien look. Before that day, I had never seen anything like it. I was a little kid in the late 80s, and my idea of aliens was the silly cartoon kind. Green, goofy, not at all like what I saw in that hallway. That's one of the reasons this has stayed with me. People usually react in one of 2 ways when I tell the story. Either they say I must have imagined it, maybe from something I saw on TV, or they go all the way in the other direction and say I must have been abducted and had my memory erased. Honestly, I can't prove either one. All I know is this. I saw something that day, and it was unlike anything I had ever seen before. I also don't believe I lost a huge amount of time. I remember enough to feel pretty certain I wasn't gone very long, even if some parts of that moment are fuzzy now. And over the years, I've never had another experience like it. No UFO sightings, no other encounters, nothing else that would make me think there was some larger pattern. It was just this one moment. One impossible, unsettling moment from childhood that I still can't fully explain. And maybe that's the part that stays with me most. The fact that after all these years, I still don't know what I saw standing there in that doorway. When I was little, for years I went back and forth wondering whether I was seeing spirits or whether something was wrong with me. Even now I still do. But there are a few parts of what happened that have always stayed with me, and they're the reason I can't fully brush it off. I think it started when I was about 6. My family and another family we were close to had gone out together for dinner, and after we ate, the adults wanted to stay longer and have a few more drinks. So they let us kids go sit in this grassy area across the road. It was a tiny town we knew well, and we'd already had the usual talks about being careful. That grassy patch sat beside the train tracks, mostly fenced off except for the crossing area. We were sitting on a bench, waiting for a train to pass because we could hear one coming and wanted to watch. Right after the train thundered by, I saw a little girl standing near the tracks. She looked around my age, maybe 6 or 7. I remember just staring at her, assuming she was another kid from town. I looked away for a second, and when I looked back, she was gone. A few days later, I saw her again. This time it was at school, nowhere near the tracks. After that, I started noticing her all over town. Then I started seeing her at home too, even though we lived a good 15 minutes away. Eventually, she started talking to me, and I talked back. Everyone around me just assumed she was an imaginary friend. Her name was something like Tessa, or maybe Tara. I'm not fully sure anymore. I just remember it started with a T. She seemed about my age, but when I asked how old she was, she didn't really know. So in my head, I just made her the same age as me. Over time, she told me how she died. She said her family had been waiting for a train at the old station near that grassy area, the one that later became a museum. She and her sister, maybe a twin, had been playing because they got there early. I remember her telling me they were running too close to the tracks and didn't understand how dangerous trains really were. Then she got hit. The way she described it was awful. Far too awful for a child to make up so clearly. For a long time, that detail haunted me. It also explained why she was always so upset whenever I got anywhere near the tracks. At some point, I told my dad what she had said about dying. I don't even remember how it came up. I just remember the mood changing instantly. He went quiet and distant, and after that, I stopped talking about her so openly. When I was in 2nd grade, I was having a rough time at school. I was getting picked on, and sometimes my teacher would let me stay inside during breaks. One day I was in the classroom with her, drawing on the whiteboard. By then, I still didn't really understand what an imaginary friend was supposed to be. So when the girl drew something on the board and my teacher turned and asked what it was, I told her, honestly, that my friend had drawn it. Years later, I found out my parents hadn't moved me to another school just because of the bullying. That was only part of the story. My teacher had told them she thought I might be schizophrenic. I stopped seeing the girl after a while, or maybe I just stopped noticing her. But I remember hearing her voice again in 8th grade, during a time when I really wasn't doing well mentally, and that shook me more than I like to admit. That wasn't the only experience I had, just the one I remember most clearly. Another time, when I was around 9 or 10, we were on a school excursion, walking along a path near the beach. By then, I'd gotten used to ignoring people I thought maybe no one else could see. I'd learned not to stare, but I must have looked too long at this one man because he suddenly started walking beside me. My friend on my other side didn't react at all, which told me everything I needed to know. So I ignored him, but he kept talking. He told me that back in, I think, July 1994, he and a few friends had gone out fishing even though a storm was rolling in. They didn't think it would get as bad as it did. None of them made it back. I still remember the flat, matter-of-fact way he said it. After that, I went through this strange phase where I became fixated on drowning. Honestly, I've always had this heavy curiosity about death, and that experience only made it stronger. When I got home, I asked my sister to look it up. I didn't tell her why. I just said I'd overheard someone talking about it. And it turned out there really had been an accident like that. Several men had died out on the water in a storm. From what I found, it also sounded like it wasn't the first time they'd taken risks like that. People around them apparently thought something like this would happen eventually. Those are the two main experiences that have stayed with me most vividly, but they weren't the only ones. I definitely remember seeing people no one else seemed to notice. My mom, my older sister, and my older brother all remember me doing that too. I've never asked my dad if he remembers the day I told him about the girl by the tracks. We only started getting close again in the past few years, and I've never wanted to risk damaging that by bringing it up. One other thing that always made me pause is that my mom went through something similar when she was a child. She told me that my grandmother had said things about it too. I never got to know much about my grandmother because she died when I was very young, but I do know this. Both my mom and I were second daughters in our families. Maybe that means nothing. Maybe it's coincidence. Or maybe it's some strange thread running through generations. I honestly still don't know what to believe. Maybe I was just a deeply troubled kid with an overactive mind. Maybe I was picking up stories I shouldn't have known. Or maybe, for a little while, people who were gone still found ways to be seen. I can't prove any of it. I just know that when I think about that little girl by the rails, it still doesn't feel imaginary. You know, I keep thinking about this dream I had back in 2021. And even now it gives me chills. In the dream, I was in my aunt's apartment building in the city where I went to college. I was standing there, holding the elevator door open while helping my mom carry up a bunch of empty boxes, the kind you bring when a place is about to be packed away. Somehow, even in the dream, I understood exactly what that meant. My aunt was selling the apartment. I remember what I was wearing too, which is such a strange detail to hold on to. I had on this bright pink t-shirt, and in my arms, I was carrying way too much stuff. There was my mom's dark jacket, a couple of my own backpacks, my sister's canvas shoulder bag, and a plastic grocery bag with a bottle of cola, some water, and a loaf of bread. It was all so ordinary, so specific, the way real life always is. What stayed with me most was the feeling of it. I can still picture my mom and my sister trying to clear everything out of the elevator quickly so we would not keep it occupied. Then I remember closing the apartment door and talking about how we did not want to say goodbye to that place. And at the same time, there was this tiny little hope in me, this wish that maybe I would see the apartment again one day, even though deep down I already knew that hope was probably not real. Then I woke up. And when I woke up, I felt awful, truly awful. I was horrified, stressed, and then suddenly so relieved when I realized it had only been a dream and that my aunt's apartment was still ours, still part of the family. Later that day, I sat with my aunt for afternoon coffee in her room at our house. At the time, she had been commuting between cities for years, and during the lockdown period, she stayed with us a lot, so that routine felt very normal. I told her about the dream almost jokingly, trying to make light of it. I even remember laughing about how, in the dream, I did not have one of those mask elastics around my wrist like I always used to back then. I said maybe in the dream COVID had already ended, or maybe I had somehow wandered into some parallel version of my own life. My aunt gave that dry little laugh of hers and said she really hoped she would never have to sell the apartment because of the family's financial situation. We all brushed it off. We told each other that, no, that would not happen. Everything would be fine. And then April 2025 came. At the beginning of that month, my aunt told the whole family she was going to sell the apartment and try to buy a place in our hometown instead. We were stunned, completely stunned. It felt like the floor disappeared under us. From that moment on, all of us tried to help however we could. Emotionally, because she was heartbroken, and we knew we had to be especially gentle with her. Physically too, because moving is something my family knows far too well. I have moved so many times in my life that I almost stopped counting properly. By the time I was 18, I had already lived in around 8 different homes. My family has always been in motion, across cities, across countries, across stages of life. So when something like this happens, everyone just instinctively starts lifting, sorting, packing, carrying. Still, knowing how to move does not make it hurt less. That whole month was heavy, stressful, emotional. Every conversation seemed to carry this sadness underneath it. And then, on April 27th, 2025, at 7 in the evening, my aunt sold the apartment. Just like that. It was done. Then came May 10th, 2025. We went back to the apartment one last time for the weekend. The plan was practical enough, just to pick up some boxes my aunt had left there, see a few family friends, and spend a little time in the city. But the second I was there, helping my mom, the dream came flooding back. And that was the moment it happened. The dream became real. Not in some vague, symbolic way. Not in a fuzzy déjà vu way where you wonder if you are imagining it. No, it was real in the sharpest, most personal sense. I was there, doing almost exactly what I had seen years before, carrying things, helping my mum, standing inside the goodbye I had once only dreamed. It scared me so much. It genuinely freaked me out. I ended up having a small panic attack because I just could not emotionally separate the dream from the reality anymore. It felt like something I had desperately hoped would never come true had arrived anyway. And the strange thing is, this is not even the first time something like that has happened to me. I have had dreams line up with real life before, but usually it is small things, tiny moments, meeting someone, wearing a certain outfit, saying a sentence exactly the way I dreamed it, sitting in a conversation, eating a specific food, hearing a song somewhere, seeing something on television. Little things, the kind of things you can almost shrug off. But this was different. This was deeply personal. This was tied to a place I have known my whole life, a place filled with memory, comfort, family, history. I know there is a name for this feeling, for when a dream seems to replay itself in real life. But even having a name for it does not make it easier. Because the truth is, I did not want this one to come true. I really did not. I do not want to say goodbye to that apartment. I have known it for as long as I can remember. Some places stop being just walls and rooms. They become part of your emotional landscape, part of how you remember your own life. And losing a place like that feels a little like losing a version of yourself too. So yes, that dream came back to me. And this time, it was real. And I am still trying to make peace with that. need to tell you what happened a few mornings ago, because honestly, I still can't make sense of it. I woke up a little before dawn, up on the top bunk like always, and the second I opened my eyes, I knew something was wrong. There was something standing in the room with me. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me in the dark, but the longer I looked, the more real it felt. It had this human shape, but it was way too tall and unnaturally thin. Its body looked stretched out, almost bent in places that didn't seem right. I couldn't see every detail clearly, and that's part of what scared me most. It was like my eyes just wouldn't settle on it. Like whatever it was, my mind didn't want to fully process it. Its head was tilted down, almost like it was staring at the floor, but it was so tall that the top of it nearly brushed the ceiling. And no, before anyone says it, I was not dreaming. I was awake. I could move my arms, shift my legs, and speak just fine. I even called out for my mom right away. That's one of the strangest parts. She always wakes up easily, even if someone just whispers her name. But this time, she didn't respond at all. I knew she was in the room because I could hear her breathing heavily in her sleep. Still, when I called for her, nothing. It was like my voice just disappeared. There's another detail that keeps bothering me. Above our bedroom door, we've had this little cross hanging there for as long as I can remember. It's been in the exact same spot for years. But the night before all this happened, it fell. Just dropped out of nowhere. I remember thinking it was odd at the time, but now it feels different. Like maybe it meant something. The thing in the room sounded like it was breathing hard. Not normal breathing either. It was rough and uneven, almost like panting. That sound stayed with me more than anything. I lay there frozen for a few seconds, just listening to it, trying to understand what I was seeing. Then suddenly, I must have blacked out or drifted off, because the next thing I remember, I woke up soaked in sweat and gasping for air. Since then, I haven't felt right. It's like this constant pressure in the back of my mind, like someone is nearby, just out of sight, watching me. I keep telling myself maybe I'm just shaken up. Maybe I'm feeding my own fear. But then something else happened today. There's a window directly across from my bed, and it faces the house next door. Some of their windows line up almost perfectly with ours. Earlier today, I glanced out and saw a shape in one of them. Tall, hunched, still, and I swear to you, it looked like the same figure. The moment I noticed it, it didn't duck away to the side like a person normally would. It just slowly pulled backward into the darkness, like it was being swallowed by it. That's the only way I can describe it. It didn't run. It didn't turn. It just receded, smooth and unnatural, until it was gone. I really don't know how I'm supposed to sleep tonight after that. I thought maybe saying this out loud, telling someone exactly what I saw, might make it feel less real. But it hasn't. If anything, it feels heavier now. All I know is that whatever I saw didn't feel like a dream, and it didn't feel human either. And the worst part is, I can't shake the feeling that it hasn't actually left.